It is 7 p.m. and I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Finance and Warrant Commission of Westwood here on Tuesday, January 14th. I'm going to grant permission to the Westwood Media Center to live stream and videotape the meeting. Is there anyone else that wishes to record the meeting? No. Well, welcome everyone. Members, presenters, I see we have public as well. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance and then go into roll call.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Bill Bruce.
Here.
Mike Gay.
Here.
Alex Yale. Caitlin Jerzak. Here. Christopher Marks. Chris Pareda.
Here.
Christine Cannon. Here. George Laham.
Here.
George Maroon.
Here.
John Carey.
Here.
Margaret Driscoll. Ryan Sturma.
Here.
Seth Fredrickson.
Here.
Susan Flanagan Cahill.
Here.
Mike Powers.
Here.
Well, everyone, as you can see, we have a pretty robust agenda. You have a lot of materials we sent out the last few days and a lot of warrant articles we're going to go over at a high level tonight. So how we're going to work this is we're going to go through each section. I'll allow the committee to ask questions, just raise your hand, and then we'll open up for any public questions. I'll ask, when it gets that time, I'll remind you again, but public, you gotta stand up, say your name, address, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak and ask questions on the topic at hand. So with that, I think given everything, we'll just jump into it. So I think, Molly, you're coming up with the select board, and I think, Joe, you'll have to open your meeting.
I would.
So FS1 is first.
Okay. Can I call the meeting to order, Mike? Bill?
Yes.
Sorry.
Happy to move
Oh.
that we open the select board.
Rascal, you moved on me. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Meeting convened. Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
Everybody, do you want, I think we need one more chair, which we can probably scooch up here. Oh, yeah. You guys are still have the speaker notes.
Thank you, everyone. So the last time we were here was back in September when the chief and I gave a brief-ish presentation about FS1. So we wanted to give a lengthy update about what's changed since then. The chief had an emergency call that happened just before 7 o'clock, so he's going to try to be here, but if not, I'm here to answer any questions. And so the select board is going to go through a number of slides for you today, and then, as we said, happy to answer questions. I believe, Joe, the clicker will move forward for you there. Want to be right here?
You're narrating this?
Nope, you were gonna do an intro, and then.
Okay.
Miriam will
Oh, I'm
start.
sorry.
Yeah.
We're happy to be back before you this evening to provide an update on the proposed Fire Station 1 project. With me tonight are my colleagues, Select Board Marianne LeBlanc Cummings and Rob Gotti and Molly. From our team of consultants, we have Don, Walter, and Chip. I can't. Excellent. We also have Chin Lin from Vertex, and who is our project manager. We also have our town administrator here tonight, Chris Coleman. Did I miss anybody, Chris? Okay. Before we take our questions, we'd like to provide a full background and context as a reminder as to the importance of this project, as well as an update to update you on what has evolved with this project since we were last before you in September. We want to acknowledge that a group of 23 individuals from the neighborhood adjacent to the fire station have filed an appeal of the Westwood Zoning Board decision, granting 7 variances for the new fire station headquarter project. This appeal was initially received December 2nd, and we received an amended appeal on December 16th, 2024. At this time, we will not be discussing the specifics of the appeal on the advice of counsel, as it is now part of an ongoing legal process. However, we remain committed to the transparency regarding the Fire Station 1 project as a whole, and will continue to provide updates on the project. We appreciate your understanding, and we are all 3 select board members, very committed to this project. At this point, I'd like to pass the presentation over to my colleague, Marianne LeBlanc Cummings.
Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the commission, for this opportunity. I know many of you are very familiar with the background that brings us to this point, but for our newer members and for residents who may not be aware, I want to go through that with you briefly. It starts in 2013, which is when the Public Safety Facilities Task Force came together, which was comprised of community members, consultants, elected officials, and town employees to explore options with respect to our then aging public safety facilities. And I will add that there was representation from FinCom on that task force, and as I was serving on FinCom at the time, we discussed the task force and its activities extensively during that period of time. And the task force evaluated multiple options in terms of locations, town-owned land versus privately owned land. And it has been asked why we didn't combine the police and fire stations at that time. And that was considered. However, the location of the fire department is obviously extremely important in terms of response times. And given town-controlled sites and cost sensitivity, there were simply no sites available that would accommodate a combined fire and police station. So what came out of that task force was an analysis and a recommendation for a phased approach to first replace Fire Station 2 in Islington. This was around the time of University Station, and more apparatus was needed there, followed by the police station, both of which were done with borrowing within 2.5, Proposition 2.5, given the new growth with the University Station at the time. So we were able to do that without any override, debt exemption override. And while the intention at the time was to proceed to Fire Station 1, a decision was made to allow the schools to go forward with the school project where they had received the MSBA grant, and recognizing that 2 large projects coming online was not going to be feasible, FS1 was put on hold at that time. So this is a really helpful timeline just to put all of that in context. As you can see, in 2013, the Public Safety Task Force kicked off. Then in 2015, I believe is the correct year there, town meeting approved the construction for the new Islington Station, FS2. 2016 approved construction for the new police headquarters. And then about in 2017 was when the work started happening on the MSBA application for Pine Hill. That was actually accepted in 2018. And then, as you all well know, a lot of work was done over several years in terms of community engagement, leading up to the 2021 town meeting, which approved the construction for Pine Hill. And then in 2025, we are going to be voting on FS1, the design funds obviously already having been approved by town meeting, which brings us to today. So, as this timeline shows, about 10 years have elapsed since the time that the town has committed to replacing Fire Station 1. And while measures have been taken to shore up the building, given its many deficits, time is running out with respect to our existing FS1. I know you've seen these before, but it's worth reiterating the deficiencies that we have in our current facility, and as a result of which we are failing to meet our programmatic needs. There are structural issues given the increased weight of the apparatus and the general age of the building, which is causing the rear wall to pull away. And as you can see, there are lally columns and I-beams that are required to support the floor above. There are major issues with health and safety. You can see here in the bottom right photo, the turnout gear that our firefighters use is directly behind the diesel apparatus, and there is no decontamination there. There are cracks in the cement floor. There is exposed rebar on the underside of the apparatus bay floor, and there are leaks in the roofing areas. All of these problems total to issues with failing to meet regulatory and code requirements such as safety and accessibility standards at both the state and federal level. There has been quite a lot of evolution in the codes that pertain to firehouses since FS1 was last renovated in the 70s, and a lot of changes and additions to those codes have been made with respect to safety and accessibility, which FS1 does not meet. In addition, the building is undersized. It was built, as we said, 75 years ago, with the last major addition 50 years ago. At the time it was built, it was sized for 4 firefighters who were all male. Now we have 7 full-time firefighters, both men and women, who need to share that space. That means sharing sleeping space, kitchen space, and restroom space. In addition, there are 5 administrative personnel who work in the building during business hours. So why this site? The location of the firehouses, our firehouses, is obviously critical to our mission readiness and effectiveness and the safety of our community. In 2022, the Select Board commissioned both a feasibility study with respect to FS1 along with an operational study to look at the current and future needs of the department. And the feasibility study was done in part to determine the best place to situate the station for optimal response time. Because just to state the obvious, when we talk about response times for our fire department, not only do minutes matter, but seconds actually matter, particularly with respect to fires, particularly with respect to cardiac arrests. And there's a great deal of data to support that. So when making the decision of where the main fire station should be located, direct access to High Street was a very high priority in terms of maximizing those response times. So we looked at possibly renovating FS1. We looked at a town-owned site on High Street, but that was landlocked. We looked at the potential of the town hall site. We looked at construction at the existing fire station site, and we put Deerfield up here because it's something that has come up, and I want to reiterate that the Deerfield school site was not an option because it remains under the care, custody, and control of the schools. So that is not an option for this project. Having gone through all of those options, it was decided that the current existing site is the best site for a new FS1. And you know, when we think about this, we also need to think of the greater context in terms of meeting the needs of our community, which is to say that we have 2 major highways, we have senior housing developments, we have Hale Reservation, we have a large commercial site, we have a number of schools, and we have a geographic area that extends from Walpole at the Bubbling Brook all the way down to the MBTA station at University Ave. It is a very large swath of land that needs to be covered, and all aspects of the town need to be covered quickly in terms of emergency response. So thank you for your very kind attention. I'm not sure if Chief Lund is not here, is that correct? He's not here. Okay, I'm now going to turn it over to Don Walter from Dorr and Whittier.
Yeah, and before Don speaks, I know one of the things the chief wanted to just reiterate to the group was how involved he and his team have been in informing the design and what the need is programmatically. So I know he had a whole lot of things that he wanted to say in his own words, but that is the gist of one of the things he wanted to reinforce. So with that, Don.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm Don Walter. I'm principal with Dorr and Whittier Architects, and have had the pleasure of doing quite a few projects here in Westwood, so it's nice to be back. But tonight, I'm going to be talking about the building project itself, really starting with the programming. And I think it's important to note, as Rob just said, that the fire department has been intimately involved with all the decisions that have been made here. And when you look at the existing building, just under 15,000 square feet, it's program and space deficient. We went through a pretty detailed programming phase with the fire department, which started with staff questionnaires, very detailed questionnaires to try to flesh out their needs, multiple meetings, and then after the review of the initial space needs analysis that came up, we actually went back to the fire department. We were able to take about 3,500 square feet out of the building. So the 36,000 square feet that you see here now really are the needs of the fire department. There's not fluff built into this program at all. And the program includes, 5 apparatus bays plus the maintenance bay, staff equipment storage, living, administration, and wellness space, training opportunities, and the separation between what we call the dirty spaces and the clean spaces, which is vitally important with firefighting for their health, safety, and wellness. So in terms of the building itself and the resulting program, what we came up with is this 36,000 square foot building. You're looking at the site plan right now with High Street to the right, Hillcrest Place to the left. The big kind of reddish purple color is the existing footprint, the proposed footprint of the new building with the outline next to it of the existing building. So you can see the difference in the size of the program. And quite frankly, the footprint is driven by the number of apparatus. I mentioned the 5 apparatus bays, the first responders that face High Street, plus the public entrance, which is at the lower public entrance at the lower part of the slide, which makes up the width of the building. As you also may know, the site slopes from High Street down to Hillcrest Place, so we're able to put program under the building also, maintenance, the maintenance bay, other vehicle storage, and the staff entrance. So, and the rest of the site is composed of the emergency generator, 24-hour operations, dumpster, staff, public parking, and a pretty robust planting program to screen the surrounding properties from the fire station. On the first floor, what you see is are the apparatus bays, the 5 apparatus bays, and you can see the public entrance on the lower part of the slide, and part of that is a watchroom or a greeter for public coming in the building, public toilets, as well as a triage room, which is very important. Often someone will come off the street with an injury and they come to the fire station, and there's a triage room where they can be initially treated, and from the lobby and with a door right out to the apparatus bay where you see ambulance 1 waiting. If they needed to be transported off site, that could occur. The other supporting spaces on this floor have to do with decontamination, and again, that separation of dirty, clean equipment and clean having a protocol that brings you back up into the administrative and living areas, and staff lockers and equipment storage on the first floor. On the second floor, coming up from below, you have the administration, along with a training room for firefighters. The dorm rooms, up the top, you can see the individual single-person dorm rooms, as well as kitchen and dining, day room, and a wellness area. Firefighters are here on 24-hour shifts, so you can imagine, while it's also a commercial and office space, it also is a very large residential area, too. And we looked for opportunities throughout the building also to create places for training. So up the top, you can see where it says training roof. That's actually the roof of the maintenance bay that's down below. So it's found space that we're able to capture, and the firefighters will be utilizing some of that for training, as well as the stair that's just down below it, the square stair that you see that is a training stair where they can bring hose. We have opportunities for throwing ladders on the outside of the building and whatnot. And then on the lower level, so bringing you back down to the back of the building, you can see the maintenance bay at the top with all of its support space, additional vehicle storage, and the staff entrance, because all the staff parking will take place down below. And I should add that it's a multi-story building, so not only do we have stairs, but there is an elevator for people to communicate vertically within the building. And then lastly, for me, I want to talk a little bit about the cost. What you see up on the screen, that's your total project budget. It's just under $40 million, and it has been $40 million since we did the initial conceptual design throughout the study. And I think working with the fire department and the working group, we've been able to hold that line and keep it to where it is. But the cost estimate that you see up here now, the $30.5 million, that came from a design development phase cost estimate at the end of October. So there's been a little bit of time that's gone by, but we're scheduled to have our construction documents estimate come to us in February. So what that does, it allows us and our cost estimators to look at the building with more detail, more things flushed out in the design, and we'll see where that number comes out. But I think it's important to note the fact that we're going through this design through bidding process and bringing actual bids in hand numbers to town meeting is very important, because the construction climate has been such that we know where escalation may be going, but you don't know for sure. We all got tripped up back during COVID. And what happened after COVID was that escalation spiked up to 14%, dropped down to 7%. Now it's probably more like 3 to 4%. So you can see there was a big fluctuation there. And before COVID, it was probably more like 3%. So we're seeing it maybe 3 to 4% now, but the word tariffs have been spoken about quite a bit lately. And we don't know what impact that may have on construction moving forward. It may have no impact on this project, especially since we're bidding at a time where it's unknown. But at the same time, bidders may say, geez, I may have to pay a tariff. What does that mean to me? So, long-winded way of saying, by going through this process, by bidding the project, by being able to bring bids in hand back to town meeting, you will have a definitive cost for the construction before the town ultimately votes on it. So, thank you.
All right, so you've heard now from previous speakers the history of how we arrived here over the last 10 years. You've heard about the current condition and the commensurate urgency of the need. You've heard about the criticality of this site for public safety based on response time and the importance of response time. Said the chief wanted to convey in person how involved he and his team were in driving the size and this design. Well, I'm going to let him speak in his own words.
Yep.
Chief.
Sorry I'm late. We had an incident that I had to handle, and I apologize for that.
Steve, grab a seat.
All right. So, Station 1, the project is a town building. We've worked with a lot of committees and boards to get to the point we're at. But what I want to convey is that 100% of the programmatic design has been driven by the fire department. Fire prevention, training, living areas, EMS triage, decon, the apparatus bay, and the maintenance bay are all things a modern fire department needs to be able to respond efficiently, quickly, be mission ready, and serve the community its best. The station is also a second home to the firefighters. And unlike our current station, this new station will be a safe and healthy place where the firefighters can thrive, serve the community best, and be proud of. So.
You've heard from the chief as that they were the driving force behind the design and all of the mission critical needs. And then Don showed you that space and how that goes based on the needs, the changes in code, etc. So that is where we are. Now, as Marianne talked about, after the design funds were voted at town meeting just about a year ago today, was the 22nd, I think we did, a working group was formed in February, and that included the chief and his assistant chief, other members of the department leadership team, staff, including the town administrator, Molly as deputy town administrator and human resources director, the facilities director, community economic development planner, the building commissioner, select board chair Joe Prepatera, and representatives from Doran Whittier and Vertex. So this group worked for months on this design that is in front of you that we have put forward. With their guidance, the architects designed the building based on what you saw, and as covered by Don, the building design with the exterior features was developed, priced out, and thus the $39 million price tag that he just went over. We've heard questions on how the cost might be lowered. I've heard numbers thrown out, $25, $30 million. Marianne, I know you said you wanted to address this one, so by all means, take this, if this was a question that you...
Yeah, I've heard the question asked, why can't we do this for 30 million? Can we do it for 30 million? And, that's not the question that you should be asking. The question before you, and for those of you who don't know, I know I've said it several times, I served on FinCom for 9 years. So I know the job that you're doing. And the job is to determine if the article before you is in the best interest of the town. And so from there, I think the question is, do we need this? Not, can we do it for a different number? We first have to determine what do we need. And that is the process that we've been talking about, and I'm so glad, Chief, that you can be here to talk about it from your perspective and to talk about what went into determining the programmatic needs. It didn't come from Doran Whittier, didn't come from the select board or the town administrators. It came from Chief Lund and the firefighters who know what those needs are, and then in communication with the architect to develop that into a plan. So that's the question that we need to be asking. What do we need? And Chief Lund can tell you why we need every square foot that's in the design before you. And what you saw, or actually I think you've got a slide, Rob, is not to steal your thunder, but at first they started with what they wanted, and then they worked that down to what they needed, understanding that cost is an issue, right? Of course we want to spend less money. Of course, everyone is very sensitive to that, but they took the list of wants, they whittled that down to what do we need to deliver service to this town, and that is what is before you.
And as you think about those needs, I want you to think about the variety of what the responsibilities are of our fire department. Yes, fire suppression, emergency response to medical situations, rescue,
hazardous materials response, emergency management and disaster planning, a lot of fire prevention work, code enforcement, maintenance of all of that equipment, buried equipment that you saw in the schematic where the bays were, public education, outreach, and of course, training. So the equipment that's housed in that station are all meant to be able to address the variety of the type of responses that they have. So as you ponder that, I just want you to know that downsizing the building would basically result in having to lop off one of those bays, which would mean diminished operational capacity and mission readiness of our fire department. So with that, we've touched on, can we shrink the building? And I think we just touched on these, so I'm going to skip over this slide here. So another question we got is, you heard Don say that the price tag has been around $40 million since the beginning. You just heard Mary Ann talk about they started with the wants, and that would have grown that number. But we pared it back. I believe, let's see here, the next slide talks about that. They reduced the size based on the original wants list by some 3,500 square feet, including elimination of a number of things. There was a lower level lobby that was for the public, a staff conference room, there was an IT office, a fire investigator and a fire inspector office as separate offices. There were storage areas and a mail room. All of these things are a media operations room, a grounds equipment storage room, a radio room, and then there were 3 double sleeping rooms. All of that was the 3,500 square foot reduction, which equates to just under $3 million in construction savings. Other things that were considered or not pursued, locating the building someplace else. If we had tried to make a joint facility with the police station, that would have meant moving town hall and reconstructing town hall. The location of the maintenance bay, that was explored, and this was the best location for that from both a cost and a mission readiness standpoint. There was no public meeting space included in it. When we looked at where we put the department while the construction is going on, we had looked at renovating the American Legion building, but it was more cost effective to use modular for temporary ops at the location where the Legion building is currently. The single gable roof, the reduction in the number of windows, radiant snowmelt system wasn't pursued. We could have done a geothermal system, that was not pursued, and nor was LEED accreditation. So there were a number of things that could have added to the cost of the project, but we knew we needed to keep this at a reasonable level, and it needed to be driven on based on the programmatic needs of the department. So how much will this cost taxpayers? If you watched our meeting last Monday, you heard Stephanie give a budget update, and one of the things that we touched on was what this would cost. And large capital construction projects, they're typically financed by borrowing. They're either non-exempt debt, like the FS2 and the police station, when we had all of that incremental tax revenue that came in through the development of University Station, so we were able to do that within Prop 2.5. Other projects, like the high school and the recently completed Pine Hill, those go under exempt debt when funds are not available within the budget to service the debt. A debt exemption needs to be authorized. So this is a town meeting approval for the borrowing article, followed by a ballot vote necessary to approve the project. The borrowing article at town meeting needs 2/3 approval in order to go forward, and the ballot requires a simple majority. And so, again, the examples are out of the high school and the recently completed Pine Hill. So the estimated cost for construction is currently is $40 million. It would be financed by issuing long-term debt, an exempt bond outside of Prop 2.5. That requires the 2/3 meeting vote at town meeting and the majority vote at the ballot. The assumptions that go into this are a 30-year note, level debt service throughout that time. The town's financial advisors are giving us an estimate right now of 4.25%. Our current single-family home average value is about 1.2 million. Now, obviously, with all the caveats that Stephanie put in here, the interest rates are subject to change, tax impacts assume no growth based on the assessed value over the life of the bond. The impacts assumes residential to commercial tax rate will remain constant over the life of the bonds. You've heard me talk many times about the importance of commercial growth. Tax impact assumes the home value will remain constant over the life of the bond as well. So with that, if you took your average home of 1.2 million and you said that we were going to be using a 4.2%, 4.25%, you would come up with the average cost per $100,000 of assessed value of $30.56. For that average home, that would mean an increase of $368. So effectively $1 a day. So, if you were to have a home that was higher or lower assessed, you see those values here on the table as provided by Stephanie. And if that, we're looking at the 4.25% bond note, but if it were 4%, it would go down to $357. If it was up at 5%, it would be $400 for the average home in Westwood. We've heard questions about why an all-electric facility, and I'm going to let Don talk a little bit about this, but it has to do with the stretch energy code that we agreed to when we became a green community back in 2012. And the building needs to achieve 15 different energy efficient credits from any number of strategies. It'd be EV parking ready and solar ready. Don, anything to add with respect to the life cycle cost analysis?
I think that's a good
Think
summary.
about, Don, come on up. We can't hear you, come on up.
He thinks this right here is a good
So I
summary.
think that's a good summary, given the
Okay.
presentation. Yep.
And so then the question is, so why now? And as we've talked about, it's 10 years in the making. The untenable situation based on safety concerns for our men and women of the department, and the proposed station, it's been 50 years since it was last updated. Mary Ann touched on all of the changes from the composition of the department to the weight of each individual piece of apparatus that is housed at that station. The time is now that we need to move this forward for our men and women of the fire department. They've been waiting patiently for this. So what's happened since September? We went before the planning board for our EIDR, Environmental Impact Design Review, and received unanimous approval there. We went to the Zoning Board of Appeals for 7 variances and got those 7 variances approved. We went to the Conservation Commission and they approved both the temporary operations and all of the stormwater management at the High Street location. We had meetings with the abutters, we've had community meetings, there have been interior and exterior design development as part of that working group, and obviously you saw the updated costs, and we've been before you. So that's what has happened since September. And what's next? Obviously, we've got another community meeting come up February 4th. We'll have updated costs in March. Construction bid setting happens in March as well. We have your public hearing on April 28th, annual town meeting on the 19th, and special town election on June 3rd. So with that, I would open it to questions. Joe, you want to return to the main chair here?
No, well, kind of like cheap seats.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Select Board and Chief Lund, for responding to some of our questions we had before in some of our other meetings, right in the presentation. I appreciate that. I'll open up to the floor for questions. I saw John.
Thanks. I'll start with a question that's not about making the building smaller, but just about communications. I saw that there is a radio room included in the project. I'm just curious about what other considerations we've given to improving the communications in the town. The reason I ask is I'm hearing more and more and more about the police department not having radios that function, that if they go down to a call for service at the Gables, they're going in with radios that don't work. So if they're having a bad incident, they're supposed to use their cell phone to call and get help. It doesn't sound like a very good thing to me. Same thing at, I don't know if it's called the Budget Inn now, or the Westwood Motor Lodge, but that facility on Route 1, and we allowed, obviously, university station to be developed and realized those funds, built a fire station, didn't fix the problem, built a police station, didn't fix the problem, and it looks like we're going to build another fire station and still not fix the problem. So I was just curious about what considerations were given to improving the overall communications infrastructure, because it could apply to both the fire department and the police department.
You want to handle that?
Sure. There are some ongoing efforts being made by the police chief and the fire chief and our public safety dispatch people to improve that situation.
I would encourage you to watch our meeting on Monday. We will have something presented that I think is a really good step towards addressing those very concerns.
Got it. Thank you.
Quick question. What's the incremental cost to make it an all-electric building?
Don, do you want to take the incremental cost? I don't know that we necessarily have a choice based on the green communities, but I will defer to Don on that.
Say, based upon the life cycle cost analysis, when we looked at 4 different systems, this actually was the most cost-effective route to go for this building.
So we don't have a number.
I can go and get, I don't have it with me today, but I can tell you.
Could we get a follow-up on the
Oh, absolutely.
incremental?
Yeah.
That'd be helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
But I just want to make sure that we understand what you're asking. The incremental cost relative to the alternatives, or just the cost above and beyond what we're paying if it wasn't all electric? Is that what I want to make sure we understand what
That
you're asking.
sounds like the same question.
Okay, yeah, it is.
You trying to trick me?
Yeah.
I didn't fall for it, but yeah, that.
We'll provide you with the detail
Thank you.
of
Appreciate
the
it.
life
Sorry
cycle
about that.
cost analysis that we did.
Thank you.
Yep.
Seth?
Just let me correct myself. Watch our meeting on February 3rd.
Thank you.
February 22nd, the last meeting. I apologize. I'm getting ahead of myself.
22?
All right. February 22. Yes, but so we have some good things.
Good, thank you.
Was there any other consideration or investigation of if we can separately have a capital request on the IT side for the town to move the INET to the police station so that we can separately move that once and sort of decouple it from this to some degree, rather than move it twice and have to set up a temporary location and set up for it? I don't know if we review that further.
I'm going to defer to Molly.
On
About the IT,
The INET?
just moving it once.
So the INET, we looked at a number of different options with the INET. As part of the building itself, it's about all in the building. You're talking the electricity, the generator needed, the walls, about $600,000 as part of the fire station. If we were going to move it to a standalone facility, that would be approximately $1 to $2 million to build if we had the land. There's no place that we were able to pinpoint as where that could be. The reason for that cost being the cost of the building, the permitting, it would need a generator, it has to be accessed 24/7. The other area that we get comments about where can we put it is if you're looking at the police station, there's the police station, sort of a 1-floor walk-through, and then the garage. Could we build that up, building a 2nd floor, which had always sort of been talked about? We got a back of the napkin quote from Doran Whittier on that. It would be about $2.5 million to build out that area. Again, permitting costs, building cost, the upgrades to the generator that would be needed to house the INET. So back to the $600,000 number, because, and I think Don had mentioned this before, or Rob, we designed this building as a box. It's as easy to build as possible, and that was to keep construction costs as low as possible. Even if we took the INET out, built it somewhere else, the building shape is going to stay much the same. So you would only see a savings of approximately $250,000.
Thank you for that due diligence, appreciate it.
Of course.
Chris?
Chief Lund, I wonder if you could tell us what the department's current ISO rating is?
Currently, we're at 4.
And with this new building, is it possible we could go lower?
The building would help, and I'm also working on other things. I'm trying to get us to 2.
What does that mean, George, for the rest of us?
Lower insurance
Okay,
costs.
my name's
Lower
Chris.
insurance, okay, I get that.
George, my name's Chris, but that's right. ISO rating is an insurance rating of the response time for the department. And it rates departments nationwide on the same factors, basically. And I know that some homeowners insurance, some residential homeowners insurance carriers will use that ISO rating to then price their homeowners insurance policies for that town. So the lower number is better. So we might actually see a benefit personally if we build this building and the ISO rating for our department goes lower.
Thank you, sorry.
Any other questions from our group?
In terms of capacity and thinking long-term, obviously we tried to build this, it seems to be as efficient to meet our needs today. Have we given consideration for future capacity? Obviously, as we continue to expand and bring more residents in and we have more development and we're splitting parcels and doing different things, have we given consideration for this building as our town continues to expand to make sure that we can handle additional capacity in the future?
Yes. The answer is yes, and that is in part why we did the operational study, because we were looking at what are our needs now, what will they be in the future. This building needs to last us 16 plus years, hopefully more. I mean, we've seen how long our current building has lasted, so it's very much taking that into account and takes into account the growth that we do expect to see in the community and what will be needed from the department.
And the growth within the department. We added 2 firefighters last year, and we hope to add firefighters in the future to get us up to the minimum numbers that I think it was the Criterion study had recommended, a minimum of 11 firefighters per shift.
I'll ask one question, and then we'll go to public. What happens if we do nothing? Let's say this doesn't pass, doesn't go through town meeting. I mean, we've seen more than the pictures tonight of the building, the state it's in. A lot of us have toured the facility. What happens, or what are our costs to continue to maintain that building if we do nothing?
I think that's a great question, Mr. Chair, and I'll address it briefly and then I'll pass it to my colleagues. In reviewing my notes of what I said to you a few minutes ago, I realized that I was remiss. And what I really failed to say in the way I should have is that, and I think you all know this, but that this is not a safe environment for our firefighters over there. And what's worse is that they know it. And they come to work every day knowing that this is not an environment that is up to code as far as safety, and that they are at risk. And yet we depend on them to save our lives, ironically enough, even though they're in that very unsafe environment. And that could be just as to the decontamination piece. And we've heard about the structural pieces. So when you ask about the cost, Mr. Chair, that's really an unknown that we're very concerned about. And what we don't want to be doing is spending good money after bad if we really have to do something on an emergent basis, which is why we're trying to do the responsible thing as a community and replace this building that needs to be replaced, the need for which has been identified for well over 10 years in the community. So I look at that as a big unknown and a big threat to the town.
To add to that, sure, the cost goes up.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anybody around this table who has seen the conditions that doubts whether or not this is needed. What will replace it will be very similar to what you've seen because it's the programmatic need as identified by the department. So time is an enemy, both for safety reasons as well as cost reasons.
And to double back on what Rob just said, Bill, I'm concerned because, as most of you know, it's a lead time of 2 to 3 years to get a piece of fire apparatus from the time we place the purchase order until it's delivered. This is the only building in town that's being inspected by a structural engineer. And my concern is simple. If that floor gives way, not only do we lose a building, but we'll lose millions of dollars of fire apparatus.
That's fair. Well, thank you, guys. I know it was a loaded question. Save the best for last, right? So we'll open it up for public questions. If there's any public that want to speak, I'm going to ask that you come up to the microphone, say your name and address, and we'll give you 2 minutes to speak.
Good evening. Thank you. My name's Paul Fauché, live at 26 Windsor Road. I don't think your question was answered for the public, at least to my satisfaction, as to what the cost is going to be as we maintain. I think you guys kind of beat around the bush. So I'd like you to really start with, like, what are the actual costs so that we can know? And then I believe I'd like a follow-up to know what is what would be the minimum maintenance or maintenance costs, and how long would that last?
Please.
So the cost to renovate FS1 to a place where it is safe to inhabit would be approximately $22 million. The fire staff would still have to vacate the building, so we would still need a temporary operations, which would cost about $2.5–3 million. So you're looking at about $25 million for a renovation of the building that would still not give the department what it needs to do its mission.
Over what period of time would that take? Like, over what period of time? That's what I'm trying
You
to...
have to do it right away to shore up the building.
So no matter what, we can't move forward. This is just, it's going to collapse?
We hope not.
I think I have 2 minutes, so I would like to ask another question here. It's specific to the maintenance bay. We've pinned that there needs to be a maintenance bay at FS1, and it seems like while you have mentioned that costs will be reduced, it seems like we could use a maintenance bay at Public Works that could service all of our vehicles, and we could reduce the size and scope of this project to bring down the cost. And at no point has this been also addressed. So I'd like to know what that answer is as well, please.
You can have the chief speak to it.
Yeah.
We actually did do that analysis of what you do when you take the maintenance bay out of the building as designed and put it on another site. And to delete, which is about 3,200 square feet, you'd be saving about $2.1 million out of the existing building. You can't take the full cost of construction per square foot out of that when you're pulling something out of the building, because you're still leaving all of the infrastructure there, all the mechanical systems and things like that. But to then take it and make it a standalone building or part of another building someplace else, you have to look at the full construction cost, because now you have to include that infrastructure, all your mechanical systems and structure and things like that. So that 3,200 square feet, then with the design and project costs, factors up to about $7 million. So you could save 2.1, say $2.5 million on this project, but you'd be increasing the cost for the town of, was that about $4.5 million? So up to $7.1 million.
In addition, we looked at the facility that we used as temporary for FS2 during its construction down adjacent to Morrison.
it is not large enough, and it would have been about $7 million, if my memory serves, Don, to build that facility to be an adequate maintenance space. So the savings on the existing building would have been more than doubled in terms of additional cost elsewhere.
I think it's important to point out, there really isn't a place to put that maintenance bay, other than where we're putting it right now.
And the other piece, and I would like Chief to speak to this, is that when a piece of equipment is being repaired on site, if it is something that is a minor repair and the vehicle can be returned to service, it increases their response time and their readiness. So locating it somewhere else decreases readiness.
Yeah, and then if we outsourced, you're looking at losing your truck for weeks. Having everything done in-house, it's done quick. We know it's a certified mechanic working on it. You can't just have any mechanic work on a fire truck. They have to have all these certifications. Our mechanic has that. And having the truck there's been days where he's doing minor maintenance on it, and we get a call, and we run downstairs, take it, and we've rolled out. So having it there and ready is paramount.
And how many days a week is the mechanic there?
He works 3 days a week.
Works 3 days a week. And how is it the same mechanic that's working at the police station and the utilities?
Nope, he's a Needham firefighter, and he works for them as their mechanic as well. We're very lucky to have him, and trying to find a full-time mechanic to work just for fire department would be difficult.
And I'm going to ask one more question because I think I'm probably at 2 minutes here. And I'll be really quick, but can you clarify square footage of this, of FS1 is how big again?
Just over 36.
36. So our neighboring towns, if I'm not mistaken, Needham's FS2 is 17,000 square feet, and Norwood's only fire station is also about 17,000 square feet. Is that correct? And I think Norwood services 30 or 40,000 people. Is that correct? And I understand that we have University. It's a very great plaza and brings a lot of tax revenue for the town. And I'm not sure about how large the land is, but it seems like we do cover a lot of space. And I understand the need for training, and it just seems like we've got a lot of space and use, that this project is very large in scope and scale.
It's built for what the trucks we have currently. There's no room for, we're not adding more vehicles. We're not adding, we're not just willy-nilly saying, all right, we're just going to do a fifth bay for the heck of it. No, we're building it for what we need. And Norwood has a bay that's, you could drive out the back and the front. They share it with the police station, so I think the square footage might be a little off there because they share training room and stuff like that. So if you figured all of that stuff in, it's going to be closer to us.
18,000 square feet's a big delta. So.
B320 Dover Road. I'm really happy to hear that this is being designed for the future and not just today, and I'm sure that accounts for some of the square footage needs, because that would be very short-sighted, so thank you for asking that question. Another future question, well, it relates to that, is I understand geothermal was investigated and taken out. I know there's a larger upfront cost to that. Was that, and you talked about life cycle costs. So was an analysis done of future costs for geothermal incorporated into that? Because if, upfront costs can bring in bigger savings long term.
Right. We did look at the geothermal system as part of the life cycle cost options. And as you said, it is a higher cost up front. The other concern that we have with this particular site is there's not a lot of site. And while we could probably make it work, we didn't get to the point to knowing how deep the wells would need to be, because you say, okay, just put it under the parking lots, right? And that yes, that makes sense, but we also have stormwater management systems under there too, so it really limited the amount of area. We do not want to put geothermal wells under the building. So all that was taken into consideration, and it was determined that really when you look at the operating costs long-term, the air source heat pumps and the geothermal were very comparable.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for looking at that so carefully. One other tiny little question, being a waste nerd. I heard the word dumpster used with singular. Does that mean there's not going to be a recycling area also?
There will be a recycling program done through the fire department with the dumpster area.
Fantastic. Thank you.
James Lennon, 43 Hillcrest. We look at the current fire department every single day. And I don't think aesthetics has really come up because we're, basically there's a few houses that sit directly behind the current fire station. So when you're saying, you're working on the maintenance of the trucks, we know, we can hear it, we can see it. You're talking a building that's going to be twice as high, 3 times as high that it currently is. Is there any consideration planting trees so that we can't see it? Because it's an eyesore. And again, we're kind of second thought. It's like, oh, well, we have maintenance bays and bigger maintenance bays, and there's going to be trucks coming in and all this. And it's like, well, wait a minute, we have to live there. That's potentially going to bring down our value of our house. Is that a consideration?
It absolutely was. There were.
So what do we get out of that? A $365 a year tax increase.
There was a screening plan, a planting plan presented to the planning board. There was a number of aesthetic type of considerations that went into the planning board review. The planning board looked at all of the things that were being implemented as part of the project and approved the project 5-0.
Right now, all our maintenance is done outside. That's why you hear it, that's why you see it.
Well, we see the trucks go by on,
And that would all be inside now.
yeah, but the trucks still have to travel down the road because it's not going to be a right-of-way anymore. Right?
Correct.
Okay, so we're talking 5 more bays, more trucks, and there's going to be, okay, well, there's going to be, everyone's going to be driving now down our road. And it's like, that's already, a potential hazard to begin with, when trucks are driving, we have children that ride their bikes. I mean, is that a consideration,
Paul DeMayo, 40 Hillcrest Place. Just gonna go back to that maintenance bay. So you have a mechanic that works 3 days a week? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that maintenance bay will be there 7 days a week for the rest of existence, correct? I think the answer is yes there.
As it has been since
The
1975.
need for a maintenance bay at this building, it's really the source of why it's so big, why we don't have an access way. No one's talked about the access way. Of course, we just mentioned it. I think I'm just worried. I'm concerned and worried why this neighborhood has to be saddled with a maintenance bay because you don't have another place for it. That's the answer you get. Basically, we don't have another place for it. Well, the DPW needs one. The fire station needs one. Islington needs one. That's the problem here is everybody gets their own. That's why the fire station and the police station weren't built as a public safety building because everybody wants their own. Now you need to maintain that. There's a cost to that. We're not consolidating anything. I think it needs to be looked into finding somewhere to consolidate or, if you have to outsource, you have to outsource. This project's going to take 2.5, 3 years. Maybe over the next 2.5 to 3 years, you guys are going to figure out somewhere to put it. But the fact that you guys come at us, you got millions of dollars to put together a plan, right? That was voted last year. Now you're coming back, you came at us with a plan that is 7 variances attached. A legal complaint now is following it. I think you guys have to be real careful about what we approve here, what we're going to consider, because the legal complaint isn't going anywhere. That's just my comment. No.
I think it's important to point out that we do have a maintenance bay now. We just can't effectively use it because of the structural problems you've heard about, and the size of the apparatus is now such that not all of it will fit into our maintenance bay. So we do have one. It's just not sufficient, and for all the other reasons that have been mentioned.
Hi there, Kathleen Nee, 10 Cedar Hill Drive. I also happen to be a member of the planning board, but I'm not speaking on behalf of planning board. I do want to say that we had hours, I don't even know how many hours of meetings that we addressed this Fire Station 1, and we received significant input and feedback from the community, from the abutters, and we made many changes to the aesthetics of the building and improved, in my opinion, screening for the building. So I do want to be very clear with this commission that this isn't the first time that that folks have had an opportunity to share their thoughts, and they certainly have been taken into consideration before this was brought to you. I do just want to mention, if I'm not mistaken, it's a 75-year-old building, correct? Okay, it's a 75-year-old building, and the last improvements were 50 years ago. And I just want to, this helps me keep this in perspective. The question is, do we need this, right? Do we need this? Is this in the best interest of the town? So 50 years ago, the Beatles were all still alive, and they were a band, right? 50 years ago. I was quiet while other people spoke. 911 did not exist 50 years ago. There had not been a human on the moon yet 50 years ago. That's what our firefighters are working with today. And we don't have the option of putting our town employees at risk every day with a building that may crumble. We just don't have that option. So I appreciate there's a lot of things that people have been considering all along the way. Do we need this? The town needs it. The employees who work in that building need this. And I appreciate everyone's comments. I really do. I don't want anyone living in Westwood to have a negative experience of living here. But I do want our firefighters to be able to get where they're needed, when they're needed, in a healthy way. Thank you.
Can we respond?
No. This is not like a public debate. This is questions. And the next person that interrupts somebody who's speaking will be asked to leave. This is my meeting, and I will have order, and I will have respect in this meeting. Next up.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Rogers-Visna. I'm at 31 Sterling Road. My question is related to the first presentation on town plan. Could you put this project into the context of the other projects that are proposed for the town, like DPW, town hall renovations? The abutting neighbors, of which I'm one of them, have repeatedly expressed concerns that Kate has brought up about the impact that directing staff traffic and all of the repair traffic through our neighborhood will have on pedestrians and residents. And the reason I understand from this meeting and from the, I think, 5 others I've attended, is that response time is really the primary reason to use the current site, but it's only a quarter of a mile from Town Hall. So how does response time meaningfully differ between these 2 sites, especially considering what I understand to be major renovations or potentially a complete rebuild of Town Hall in the future?
We currently have a facility study being conducted across all municipal buildings, across all school buildings, so that we can assess all of the need. A lot of the buildings were built in and around the same time. Many of them are coming due in and around the same time. And so we know we can't build everything new. And the only way for us to be able to effectively figure out how we might repurpose existing buildings is to know what their condition is so that we can prioritize and then begin to have the types of discussions that allow us to responsibly look at how we might accomplish all of the needs that are going to be identified through this in the most efficient and effective way possible as we move forward. That's why the study was commissioned.
Bruce Cole, 33 Hillcrest Place, and building on the last question, does Westwood have a capital development plan, and is it accessible to the public?
Yes and yes.
Yes and
We have a
yes.
5-year capital plan.
And how do we access,
It's on the town website, sir.
from the town website? Okay,
sir.
thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Marsh. I live at 17 Oxford Terrace. I think that the full facilities study is a great segue to one of the concerns I have. A little bit about me. I do live in the neighborhood behind the fire station. I'm active on the Rotary Club. I'm a residential real estate broker in town, and there's so much that I love about living here. That's different from where I grew up, and that's why I chose to move here. It is a very tough time financially, and so the $368 is somewhat of a digestible number, but what I see day to day professionally is people who want to stay here, and they're having a really hard time. The cost of living is high with inflation, these numbers rising. We don't have a date on the completion of the facilities study, nor how any of those may also increase or cause an override. And I would really just behoove the Finance Committee to just take a look at that for people who want to stay here. And the other thing I will say is people who want to move here with a very healthy budget are being priced out. When we look at that monthly payment and go through their home searches, the budget's the same, and they're choosing other towns over us mostly because of taxes and just hard costs of living of being here. And it's not really a direct question, it's more something that I just ask of all of you. With this design being so far down before abutters were met with and before it was presented, I feel like we're between a rock and a hard place. That $3.5 million was spent. That design was done before getting input. And I want it to be done right and not just done fast for June's approval, to compensate for other needs of the town. And that is not just a concern of an abutter, that's a concern of a taxpayer. So thank you for your time. I appreciate all of your volunteering and what you do.
Hi, Wendy Thurman, 472 Far Reach Road. There's no denying that there needs to be a new fire department there. I think my concern, and I hear it tonight here, and this is my first meeting coming regarding this, the plan, is the size. And I know that's what you want, but sometimes we always don't get what we want. And I look at that training room, I don't know if you can bring up the second floor, but there's a training room in the police department that's relatively brand new. And I do think as a town, we have to start to work together and use the facilities, as you said, sir, together. And maybe with the forward planning, say, well, we have a training room at the police department. Do we need that massive training room that we saw on the second floor? I think the square footage is ridiculous. And I do think it all comes down to the taxpayers. You want it, but there are spaces there that can be shrunk, like that big visiting center when you walk into the fire department. I do think it behooves you to go back with something a little smaller, especially with that exit in the back, disrupting an entire neighborhood that supports the fire department fiscally.
As was stated earlier, the size of the box is driven off of the first floor bays for all of the equipment that services all of the responsibilities that the firefighters have and the varied needs and types of responses they have. That equipment is what drives the footprint of the box. Can't put the equipment on the second floor. So the second floor is being utilized. That training space is part of the second floor space that's available, and it's part of what the chief and his team have identified as part of their programmatic needs.
Okay, so maybe I was confused. So the amount of equipment you have today is changing when you get the new building?
No, it's the
So
same.
how is it housed today there, and you have to change the footprint with the new
Because some
building?
of it is behind and underneath currently. We moved all of the bays for response time purposes onto facing High Street.
Move on to the next agenda topic?
Can I, just close one thing, Bill?
Yes.
I'll say it before you do. You're gonna say, Joe, you're full of malarkey. When I started in that building back in the 70s, we had a crank phone that went from the police station to the fire station on High Street to the fire station in Islington. That's how old that building is, that we were using a crank phone. As far as the Norwood Fire Station, I don't know the numbers, but I do know they are looking at the situation with, they happen to have floors, apparatus floors, that have deficiencies as well. And they may be looking at a new station. As far as when that last addition was put on, I'd like to remind you that the department responded to about 3 calls per day. And today they're responding to 12 calls per day. Back when that addition was put on in '74, we had 1 ambulance. Today we have 3 ambulances. And as far as the mechanic and the bay goes, we're talking about 3 days a week. I think that should be kept in perspective. Lastly, and kudos to the chief and his team. When I was on the fire department, we had to lower, if we had a drowning, we had to lower the boat from the ceiling on back of a truck and then drive to the scene. Today, they have one of those inflatable rigs on a trailer they can hook up immediately to make the rescue. So they're doing an outstanding job, and they want to do their very best, and they should have the tools to do it. Thank you.
Sorry, one more question. Carmen Lennon, 43 Hillcrest Place. I want to just say, we thank the fire department and our firefighters for everything you do. We recognize there's a need here. The one ask that I have of the finance committee as well as the planners is to consider, if this project does move forward, how are we going to assess the safety needs that are going to be needed and necessary and be built in to the back street, Hillcrest Place, which currently does not have the safety requirements to take on the added traffic and commuting that's going to happen on that street and in that neighborhood. And that will present new added costs that have to be considered and have to be incorporated as part of this project.
I think that was covered pretty extensively during the planning board process.
So respectfully, I don't remember seeing that. I've attended the meetings. Is that public anywhere, and can we
Yes.
see that?
Yes, and go to Westwood Media. It's a great resource.
Any other comments, questions? All right. Move on to the next agenda topic. Citizen- Oh.
I was thinking we'd probably keep it till we finish our article.
Yeah, till you get to your select board articles, at least, I figured. Who's covering the citizens petitions one?
So if Molly is here, we're going to cover the citizen petitions. So I don't know if Molly's going to lead that or who's going to lead it. Molly's not here.
She's with
Molly, are you going to handle the citizen petitions or are we?
Nope, that's being incorporated.
Okay.
Citizens petitions are based on the citizens.
Yeah, okay, great. So therefore, we're going to call in,
Then the budget articles were next, but I don't think. Yeah. So then we just go to select board articles then. Yeah. Some select board articles.
So we look for Stephanie's up.
Oh, Stephanie, out?
Vince, do you want me to go? I think Rachel is anxious.
Yeah, oh, sorry. So we want Joe to go.
Yeah.
So, if Ms. Ames is here, I think you should hear from her first, but it's your prerogative, Mr. Chairman. I can tell you I've reviewed Citizens Petition 1 and have opined that the, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you stay where you are. I'll bring it to you. You good?
No, it's okay. I don't move quick, but I still move. So that the petition article calls for a revision of the bylaws. The problem is the date of town meeting is determined by section 2.6.6-1 of the charter. So you would have to amend the charter to change when town meeting is. So what she's calling for would not be effective in effectively changing the date from Monday to a Sunday night.
So just to clarify, that would mean indefinite postponement?
Yes.
You wouldn't consider this article?
Yes.
Okay.
Does everybody know what indefinite postponement is?
Probably shouldn't, yeah.
They're like old times.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Let me slide it towards the microphone. Stay right there, Pat. Okay, Bill?
Well, do you want to just explain indefinite postponement? That actually,
Well, indefinite postponement is something that the FinCom can do when it wants to take no action on a warrant article. You can vote it down, but you can also vote indefinite postponement. If you get to town meeting and people at town meeting want to overturn indefinite postponement, I believe it's a 2/3 vote of those present to overturn indefinite postponement and consider that warrant article on its merits. And then you have a discussion on that, and you determine, depending on what the warrant article is, either a majority, 2/3, and there are some warrant articles that might be a supermajority. I don't think we've got any this year. Then the vote would determine whether or not that warrant article goes forward.
Great, thank you.
Joe?
We actually have there is a question, I believe. Do you have a question, or?
I'd like to elaborate on what town council just said. If you vote indefinite postponement, that's basically a no, and the petitioner, I don't know who she is, she can't bring that back for 3 years.
The same article.
Is that correct, Matt? There is a time limit. I don't have it memorized off the top of my head. I don't dispute what was just said. But others, for example, if the select board decided it wanted to bring it back the next year, it could come back the next year. So it's not a hard and fast rule that you won't see it for 3 years.
Just as a point of clarification, the way it's written.
Chris, if you could come up.
Hang on, one at a time.
The way, just as a clarification, the way Citizens Petition 1 is written, if it came back, it would still be improper. It wouldn't be accurate where the state would approve it anyway.
The way it's written, no.
Thanks, Chris. It's all you, Joe.
Oh, sorry, thanks. Good evening, my name is Joe Privateer, and I live at 16 Dean Street. Like yourselves, I really enjoy serving the residents in our town. It's important to me, and we all enjoy serving our community. My fellow select board members, as well as Mike and some of the others here before me tonight, we enjoy serving the townspeople. Shortly after I was elected, I was approached by a number of folks who asked me, why don't we have yard waste pickup in the summertime like we used to? I listened to each resident carefully, and after a while, I started to see a pattern. And that pattern was this: with the exception of one person, they were all senior citizens who were reaching out to me. I observed during my walks or bike rides around town, I would pass the homes of several of these residents that had asked me about it. Their lawns, gardens, yards were beautiful. They were meticulous. It was then that I realized that gardening is one of the hobbies that they took great pride in their work, and they enjoyed being outside. As a healthcare worker, I thought this was wonderful, seeing seniors outside, active and enjoying themselves. I should also mention that there were neighborhoods that I did not have to, which I'm sure you run into, Bill, contend with landscape trucks blocking the road while on my bike ride, if you get what I'm saying. I did ask Christopher Coleman about this, and he said that because I was new, he said because of the fiscal budget had already been cast, that it would have to come up for the next fiscal budget. In October of '23, I picked up the capital plan for 2025 to 2029. I clarified with Chris that this was capital items only. Chris said yes. I told him that when we do the operational budget, I would like to have some input, especially into the DPW operational budget, to discuss Todd putting this into his contract. Chris told me that we stated that it would be discussed in January. In February of '24, a select board meeting, I asked what happened to my request to participate in the ops budget for the DPW. I'm not sure exactly what happened. There was some discussion along the lines that I should have asked in October. Fortunately, Chris did recall us discussing it in October. I asked Chris, he probably hated seeing me come through his door so many times about this. I tried to get this done without having to submit a petition article. I was truly hoping. I did not think that $17,000, when you have a $110 million budget, was going to be exceptionally difficult. But as it turned out, it did. And that's simply, and the reason why I submitted the petition article is because Chris and I had discussed many times about trying to get this done as quickly as possible, but the stars didn't line up. And I did not want to miss the opportunity again as I had last year, which is why I submitted a petition article. If Todd and Brendan can pull a rabbit out of the hat and get this done, terrific. I'm happy to go with indefinite postponement. And that's why I submitted the article. I missed it once, I didn't want to miss it again.
Thanks, Joe.
Any questions, I guess, on
We're gonna do FinCom first. Yeah.
questions on, can't really answer many questions on one because the person's not here, but on citizen petition 2, any questions?
So the budget that you've pulled together, that came from the DPW's estimate of what it would cost for a one-time pickup, will that scale as more community members participate or don't participate? How is that number derived?
You know, part of the dilemma with this is that, and Chris, you correct me if I'm wrong, but the opportunity for them to review that contract, you really haven't had enough time, or Todd has not had enough time to carefully review. Is that correct?
No, it's been reviewed.
It has?
Yes.
Okay.
Todd is continuing to work with the vendor on the extension of the contract, including the cost, all the costs for recycling, trash disposal, as well as the yard waste pickup.
So I think the question you're asking, I think the answer to it is when they add a yard waste pickup, it's for everyone in town.
It assumes everyone in town is going to utilize it.
Yes, you have to deploy it. Chris, correct me
This
if
is
I'm wrong.
to take place in
Perfect.
July.
Got it. In the event that only half of the community actually participates, there is not a cost savings there. It still remains the same amount that we anticipate.
So currently, we have 10 yard waste collections, and that would apply to those 10. So if every resident doesn't participate, we're still charged that same rate, or that same fee for each collection. So for this additional collection, the same thing would apply.
George, you have your hand up.
I had two parts. So basically, it's a flat fee. It's not a per unit cost.
Correct.
The other question I had, and, doing my own yard, is it possible, would it be more cost effective to bag it and bring it to a transfer center or recycling center instead of the 25,000 foot in the bill, is there an extra cost if we were to bring it to the recycling center or somewhere in town? Yeah, I'm hoping you can. Yeah.
So when Joe brought this up last year during the budget process, there was a conversation with the board prior to the board voting the budget. So just as clarification, as staff members, we present something to the board has to vote it. It becomes their budget, which their budget then gets passed on to you. So there was a discussion regarding this additional pickup amongst the board members regarding where would you take some funding to pay for this. The board did vote the budget as recommended, which did not include that additional pickup. But what we did do with Todd and Brendan's leadership is they found a way to have a collection at the DPW, and it was for a period of several weeks where residents could bring their yard waste to the, and that was, I want to say, under $5,000, and it had multiple weeks. The challenge is some of the residents had difficult time transporting it themselves, and also we experienced, again, being the first time, that some residents had difficult time taking it out of their vehicle and actually putting it into the container. So there are certain things that we could do to improve that. But what we've been asked is, yes, we did. So we tried as a pilot, and surprisingly, at least to my surprise, we had more participation than I anticipated. So it was from that standpoint, we did have a number of residents that did use it, that did utilize it from that standpoint.
And it was a delta of about 20 grand. You said 5,000.
It's about 5,000.
They also did a cardboard dumpster this year for the holidays, which was greatly appreciated.
I will pass that on.
Ryan and then Seth.
Yeah, only feedback is if it could be specified, it could be any week except for that first week, just so it could maximize the usage of the town. Just because I know a lot of people travel the week of 4th of July, so if we can get it maybe that second, third, or fourth week, just to make sure that's taken into consideration.
Yeah, so if the board votes 11 pickups, if there's an additional pickup, if this citizen petition were to pass, and if this was able to fund an additional pickup, it would not be the week of 4th of July.
Yeah. Did there used to be a July pickup? I feel like it was 2 years ago I noticed, because I used the waste pickup, that it sat there all through July. Historically, do we have that and it went away?
I don't have exactly the year, but the Public Works did a study, and what they did is they took the collection from the summer and moved it where they were getting greater tonnage from a collection standpoint.
Okay, yeah.
So that's so they had 10,
So we had
including
10,
the
and
summer,
then they shifted it.
and then they shifted it where the months that they found through their study.
Okay.
So I listened to the select board meeting last week, the whole meeting, and I heard some of the discussion around this and Todd's discussion, so I'm sharing this with the rest of you, around the contract. And he indicated that while he's in contract negotiations, he felt positively that he could negotiate an 11th pickup into our deal without increasing our costs. So my question is, if that happens, does this petition go away?
I would be the happiest guy in the room.
Just a point of clarification.
Yes, sir.
The cost would increase with the new contract. There wouldn't be an additional request from the budget he submitted. So I just want to be clear on that. Okay.
Yeah, you're right.
I'll still be the happiest guy in the room.
And just, from a process perspective, you don't remove this article. We would just, indefinitely postpone it. Or would you remove?
Point of
the
order.
article?
Petition article would require the signatures of everyone who signed it to remove it from the warrant.
So if Todd comes back and says, we are not increasing our budget, we are going to increase 11th pickup, we as a FinCom will have to indefinitely postpone this. We will have to make a decision on it, knowing that, quite frankly, Joe isn't in support of it. Go ahead.
Just a point of clarification. The select board would need to vote they want the 11th pickup.
There we go.
Just to
Got it.
Okay, cool.
We would look for them for that guidance, and then if they vote that, then, and Todd's able to work his magic, which I am also confident Todd will be able to work some magic, then that's what we will do.
And so it comes for us, we have that information, we make a decision as a FinCom. Great.
And I don't want this to reflect on Todd. I think is outstanding. Does a great job. It's not.
Absolutely.
It's just the stars didn't line up in time.
Yes, Mike.
Just so I'm clear, Chris, you mentioned there was 11 pickups at one time?
No, I'm sorry. If I if I was unclear, there was a pickup in the summer.
Okay.
And what they did is through their study, they noticed that the tonnage in the summer was very low. So what they did is they reallocated that 10th pickup to a period where the tonnage was greater. And so that's why we do not have a July or August pickup right now.
So September.
It could have been November or December where they added that additional pickup, where they saw that there was a greater for brush and yard waste.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Good. Public questions?
Still like the cheap seats.
Good evening. Good evening, Nada Milosavljevic Fabrizio, and I live at 32 Webster Street. I'm with Joe, and I think this is an embarrassment that he has to come in front of this commission with the petitioned article. It's $23,000. We just spent $90 million for an elementary school. We're looking at $40 million for a fire station, and I know, I'm under, correct me if I'm wrong, most of the committees and the commissions and the boards in this town have reserve accounts, and I find it unbelievable that you can't find $20,000 from somebody's reserve account that they're not even going to spend. So where does that reserve account go? Does it keep increasing because it's not spent? That's another question for another day. But again, I think this is an embarrassment that he had to come forward with the petitioned article. Despite the optics and the perceptions that people have of the town of Westwood, not everyone lives in a multi-million-dollar home. My husband likes to do his yard work. Other people can afford to have landscapers, but not everybody has landscapers. People like to do it, and I think that, again, one additional pickup, regardless if it's beneath whatever the tonnage is, somebody should find $20,000, and this should not be a warrant article. Thank you.
One more.
Claire Galkowski, 320 Dover Road. I'm a solid waste professional, and if Todd would work with me, I would easily be able to help him find $23,000 savings. So I've tried. So that's all I'm going to say.
That's it. So we'll move on. Stephanie's around here somewhere to the budget articles.
Thanks, Pat. Yep, I got it.
That would be embarrassing to pull a table over.
Oh,
Just like in the bar rooms.
right in my line of not seeing.
I'm not laughing.
Not yet, because they have the select board article still, and then they'll close it after that.
Welcome, Stephanie.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Allison, are you going to flip forward, or do I have a clicker?
Could I just provide a
There
quick
we go.
overview?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Could I provide a quick overview? Of course.
Yeah, of course.
So just for the FinCom to hear, when the select board voted to close the warrant was closed with 41 articles, which is the most since I've been here. That consists of 13 budget articles, 2 citizens petitions, 3 select board articles, 6 planning board articles, and 12 miscellaneous articles, which I can certainly go over. And so what Stephanie's going to lead with is discussing the financial articles. And just for clarification, when we get to the select board articles, you've already heard FFS1, which is one of them, and then we'll talk about some of the other ones as well.
Thanks, Chris. So my portion of this is the 13 budget articles. So what I'm going to do tonight is do sort of a high-level overview. I'm happy to take any questions, obviously, and then more details on each individual article and sort of what's contained in them will be at your February 11th meeting. So budgets 1 and 2, although this is for the FY26 budget, the first 2 budget articles refer to the FY25 budget. The first, Article 1, is for budget adjustments by transfer. So that's adjustments within the FY25 budget that may have increase in expenditures and therefore need a supplemental budget within that year. Some examples of things in the past couple of years that have come up are the DPW streetlight budget might need a supplement, legal services, things like that. It could also be the case that this article is 0 if there's nothing that comes up that is needed. Budget Article 2 is for adjustments by appropriation. So what this means is it's transfers from available funds to various budgets for FY25 where supplements are needed. Some recent examples of that are transfers to the snow and ice budget if we're over, ambulance services, special education reserve for the schools. This funding source is things such as ambulance receipts, free cash. So it's available funds, but not transfers from within the specific budgets of other departments. So then Budget Article 3 is probably the biggest one at town meeting. It's what's known as the omnibus article. It compiles all town budgets. So that includes the municipal operating budget, the school operating budget, fixed costs, debt, and then the sewer budget. That's what's called, at town meeting you'll hear Appendix D. So the detail of that is listed on numerous pages. It looks like an Excel spreadsheet of line by line for each department's salary and expenses. Budget Article 4, so the following 7 articles relate to the capital budget, and I'm going to go through them one by one. And these are all funded with available funds, so non-taxation sources. Budget Article 4 is for $1,525,000 currently. That is the municipal capital improvement. It's what we call the base capital budget that funds municipal projects. Budget Article 5, same thing, but on the school side. So that's at $1,140,000. And that goes towards, they have certain categories that they use for their base capital article. Budget Article 6 is for sewer capital improvements. This is funded with sewer retained earnings. Budget Article 7 is for sewer capital borrowing. So I talked about this before. This is for what's called the I&I program. So every other year we do this $500,000 borrowing. It's a zero interest loan for $125,000, and the rest is a grant. It's a great program. The MWRA does this. It's only for MWRA communities. We've done this for another number of years, and then on the off years, we do an allocation for investigative work. So this is the actual improvement side of that program. Budget Article 8 is for $1,035,000, and this article is funded with ambulance receipts and cemetery trust funds. So those two available funding sources. Budget Article 9 is for $1,252,000. That is funded with meals and hotel tax. So this is what's called the additional capital article. This is things that don't fit within our base school and municipal budgets, projects that come up that maybe are on the larger end, townwide projects, things that have been deferred, larger pieces of equipment, things like that. Article 10 is also an additional capital improvement article. That's for $920,000, and that is funded with free cash. So the same thing, additional projects that come up. Budget Article 11. The town established a policy to increase the stabilization reserve. This is the town's primary savings account. And as part of the financial policies, there's an annual appropriation into this account. The amount is $125,000. It has been that for a number of years now. This account is very important to the town's bond rating. Budget Article 12 is $1,590,000. That's an appropriation to what we call the OPEB Liability Trust Fund. Westwood employees accrue benefits throughout their service that will be realized after they retire. One of the biggest pieces of that is what's called other post-employment benefits, OPEB. So this article goes towards reducing what's called the unfunded liability portion of that. Budget Article 13, this is not a standard one. It's an appropriation of $300,000 into the Aid to the Elderly for Senior Tax Relief Fund. The last time this was done, I believe, was at the annual town meeting in 2022. There was an allocation also of $300,000. This program offers senior tax relief. It was a fund that was established by town meeting in 1999 to provide tax relief assistance to those qualifying low-income Westwoods elderly and disabled residents. It's a great program. Each year, there's allocated about $90,000 from this fund to those who qualify for it, so this would just be another appropriation into that account. And on the budget side, that's 1 through 13. Happy to take any questions.
So have you identified the funding sources for 8 through 11? 12 and 13 just coming out of the general general tax dollars essentially, or what's the funding source in those two?
So for which ones?
11 and 12. I'm sorry, 12 and 13.
12 and
was free cash.
13, thank you, great question. OPEB is funded with taxation, and 13 will be funded with free cash.
Thank you.
And that is standard for the OPEB. It's been funded with taxation since the program started.
Chris?
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Great high-level overview. I look forward to the meeting where you present some of the more detailed information about what these capital improvements are. What was the certified amount of free cash?
It was 14.3 as of July 1st, 2024.
And that's what we're going to be working off of. Okay.
And I should mention that I did do an overview of the capital budget for the select board at their January 6th meeting.
Thank you.
Quick question on Budget Article 13. Do we go and look for additional funding when we hit a certain level? And is that a level that we've hit?
This fund traditionally there was donations that came into it that sort of funded it. And then there were certain years also that the select board, which was great, they did a supplement. So say we were handing out $100,000, there was $50,000 in donations, the select board reserve fund would supplement the other $50,000. Donations have dwindled a bit. The allocation that was made in 2022 has carried us up until now. We probably have funding for another year or two left. This would just replenish that and make sure that we could carry the program forward for years to come.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Any public questions?
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to select board articles.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Stephanie.
See you in a
Yes,
few
I'm
weeks.
sta- oh, I'm staying, apparently.
She's not going anywhere yet. So select board articles, we currently have 1 through 8. Select board 1 is FS1, which you've already heard that presentation. Select board 2 is the home rule petition under the charter review, which I believe the committee has received information from the charter review committee and a presentation as well. Select board 3 is a local option, the prudent investor rule, and I would just ask Stephanie if she could just, oh, thank you. If Stephanie can just go over the prudent investor rule.
Oh, yes, sure. So this is a local option. It would be acceptance of Mass General Law 203C, which is the prudent investor rule. The background on this is there is a legal list in Massachusetts, which is a list of interest-bearing obligations that a municipality can invest in, including stocks, bonds, and notes. The town currently invests trust funds in accordance with this Mass General Law. So the acceptance of this local option would allow for a broader range of investments. The prudent investor rule is a legal standard that requires fiduciaries like trustees managing the trust funds, so say a town treasurer, to invest assets with the same care and prudence that a reasonable person would when managing their own investments. So this applies to the investment and management of trust assets in this case, so it would only be for trust funds in Westwood. There's no obligation to do so if this local option is accepted, and the town could continue to invest under the Mass legal list of investments as currently done. We have people who give guidance on investments here in Westwood. It's an oddly phrased rule because clearly, we are prudent investors. We treat these funds prudently. This is just a local option that a number of communities are now adopting to expand the options for investments. Any questions?
Would you just mind giving an example or two of what options that would open up for us that we don't have currently?
We would probably
Crypto.
be doing the same types of bonds, stocks, things like that. It's just there's a list right now of, please don't ask me, I think it's like 20. So you can't really diversify.
Okay.
So, and that list is tricky too because say it's pharmaceutical, whatever it is, it's not diversified in itself. So that list is tough to stay within. So this would sort of just be broadening. We wouldn't be doing anything crazy different than what we are now. It would just be a larger list of where we could invest.
Okay.
Not to make you name the list, but like, how old is that list? Like, is it a static list from years ago?
Yes.
Okay.
And who would make the decision as to what additional funds?
So we would work with our financial advisors, banks, but it would be the treasurer,
Who is?
myself.
I just go to the next
Yeah,
one?
let's run.
So the next, Select Board Article 4 is what we call the HEROES Act. It's a local option for veterans, and Stephanie's going to explain.
Bear with me, because the assessor did a great job of explaining this the other day. So recent legislation under Chapter 178, Acts of 2024, known as the HERO Act, so it's HERO, the HERO Act, introduces 2 new veteran property tax exemption clauses, clauses 221 and 22I and 22J. Really boring stuff. Adoption of these clauses require a vote at town meeting. So the Board of Assessors is recommending that the town accept Clause 22J, which provides an additional exemption of up to 100% of the amount currently granted to eligible veterans on their domiciles. So they voted to support this at the maximum 100% increase, aiming to provide the greatest benefits to eligible veterans. And the town assessor did a great job of the anticipated financial impacts. It would be about $34,000 total increase to what we call our overlay. So the town gives out a number of exemptions for different reasons. This is one of them. So it would be coming out of that overlay fund with a financial impact in the first year of $34,000, which is approximately, it's less than 1% of our current overlay. And that's based on the exemption granted in the fiscal year. So it's a great benefit for the veterans in town. Any questions?
Well, I don't want to belabor the point, but
Sure.
Not every veteran would be eligible, just certain veterans, right?
Not every veteran, correct. There is, I know we have a list of who gets it right now.
So whoever is
So
getting...
it's whoever is currently getting it, it would just increase the benefit to those people who already qualify.
Gotcha.
And that benefit would go from whatever it currently is to 100% of the total tax
Correct.
liability.
Say that
No,
exemption,
absolutely not.
sorry.
No. It's
Okay.
not 100% of the tax liability, it's 100% of what their benefit is, a double of their benefit.
Darn it.
So
Got it.
say someone is currently getting a $400 tax exemption, which is about a normal range, it would go to $800.
Got it.
We'd have a lot of questions if it was the other.
I see.
A lot of questions.
All right.
Thanks
Any
for
more
explaining that.
Well, thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Nice job.
Oh, am I being kicked out or should I?
No, you're welcome to stay.
I think Nora's
I would-
coming up.
is Nora
Okay.
here? If Nora could come up to help us with the next one. While Nora's coming up, just to remind the members of the FinCom who were here last year, but also to inform the new members. As the numbers that you're seeing, Select Board 1, Select Board 2, Select Board 3, that's what we have now. When the board votes the final warrant, you'll see Article 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you won't see it in the final form, Budget 1 through Budget 13. You'll see it Article 1, and then the board will also make a determination where the articles will be placed on the warrant.
So I'm Nora Locklean, I'm the Director of Community and Economic Development, and I can take on Select Board Article 5. So this will be a request to the state legislature for a local option to add 2 alcohol licenses to Westwood's Select Board's ability to grant 2 additional alcohol licenses. Currently, we have 5 Section 15 alcohol licenses that only permit the sale of beer and wine. What we will be requesting are 2 additional licenses for grocery stores to allow them to sell all alcoholic beverages. This comes at the request of Wegmans, who is interested in selling all alcohol in Westwood, as they do in many of their other stores. The reason the town is requesting 2 licenses is there's the assumption that our other large grocery store in town, Roach Brothers, may be interested in this at some time in the future. So to allow the 2 stores to be competitive, we are requesting 2 licenses. And then the Select Board would have the ability to review license applications and grant them if they're appropriate.
George. What would we, it's a full liquor license, so what would we actually, what would the town sell it to because you have to buy a liquor license, it's an asset. For any corporation to have,
So not in Westwood, you cannot sell an alcohol license. You can apply for an alcohol license that's granted by the Select Board to the business for a 1-year period and is non-transferable. It can be renewed year after year after year by that business, but it's not transferable. There are many towns and cities in Massachusetts that have an alcohol license, much like a taxi medallion, where you actually own it. That's not the case in
So
Westwood.
each corporation in Westwood, for example, Lambert's, does not own their beer and wine license.
They pay a fee on an annual basis to obtain a license or to obtain a renewal of that license. But if they choose to stop selling or they sell their business,
They can't sell it.
they cannot sell that. No,
What
the
is
new
the fee?
business would come in. I believe it's $5,000 for a single-year all alcohol license.
What's the step up? So like, what are they selling right now versus like, what will they be able to sell? Is it like vodka? Or
So they can sell beer and wine only, wine and malt beverages. And this would allow them to sell any alcohol. So that would include, you know,
There we go. Yeah, there we go. Okay, thank you.
And this is limited just to grocery stores? This is
So it
for-
is being proposed for grocery stores in excess of 20,000 square feet in size, and we only have 2 of those in town.
That was my question. You nailed it. Thanks.
Why could we not open it up further to smaller businesses?
So I think the only request we've received so far is from a grocery store. And we have 5 licenses for other food stores for beer and wine, and the storage of the materials that they need to sell is already a challenge. If we were to add to that the storage of additional alcohol, it would be very difficult, and most of those businesses would not be able to accommodate the storage at their locations.
But I guess why wouldn't that be their, why couldn't the town be prepared to, why is the request for with two specific businesses in mind versus opening it up for broader and making sure that businesses can make that decision on their own behalf and not them be immediately limited because there's not a license available?
So when Westwood first moved from a dry town to a town that allowed the sale of alcohol, they were very careful in selecting what would qualify as a business that could sell beer and wine, and it was limited to beer and wine. And the idea was not to allow package stores, just to allow grocery stores to sell beer and wine. This additional request is for large grocery stores to sell more than that, but not for smaller grocery stores. And the reason, I think, is that the larger grocery stores need this to be more competitive, or that's the position that they have made, that they need this to be more competitive and more in line with their multiple locations of their stores. That's not the same with our smaller food stores.
And what are we proposing we charge them for these licenses?
I believe so. I'd have to check on this, but I believe it's $5,000 a year that is charged for an all alcohol license.
Okay, I'll switch from question to opining, but it feels like this is something where if the very large groceries find it as a competitive thing, we can have a license tier for those very large companies and charge them appropriately, and make sure that we have something else for these smaller businesses to compete. It feels very one-sided. First we're hearing about it, it's like the 2 big businesses can have the licenses and everybody else tough because we've sold them. I hope that the team will kind of look at that in a little bit more detail.
So
Just from my one opinion for the first time hearing about
So
it.
if the select board is successful in having these licenses granted by the legislature, they will revise their rules and regulations, and when they're doing that, they can take a look at their fees as well.
So one comment and one question. The fee is actually pretty normal for what they charge around the state and frankly around the country. But then if you just thought about as you're writing the rule and considering grocery over 20,000 feet, how that could be interpreted by Target.
So it's the grocery portion of the property. So Target is a retail store that contains a pharmacy, contains a grocery store, and contains a general merchandising
So the actual
section.
grocery
So
component would
the
have to be
grocery
20,000?
component would be measured to be
Makes sense.
20,000. And I'll also point out that there are other exclusions that the select board already has in its regulations. For instance, a gas station, while it can sell food, cannot get an alcohol license. So they've been fairly careful in how they've moved from a dry town to the place that we are now, and this is an additional step that they're considering.
Would there be any additional cost in enforcement of the licenses and how they sell and education? Would there be any additional expenses if we were to do this?
No additional expenses to the town. The town already undertakes a, for lack of a better term, a sting operation to test our cellars, and we would be testing the same locations. That would not change.
We call them compliance checks.
Compliance checks.
Yes. Compliance checks, yes, thank you. Thank you.
Sting's gonna look better.
Compliance checks, Joe, it's compliance checks.
Stings for them.
The only other question or comment I have would be just if you considered, or has the town considered just how that would impact home delivery of distilled spirits in the community? Because that would be not entirely new, it still happens right now, but it would certainly expand the availability through things like Instacart from Wegmans, or I'm sure Birch Brothers has one too.
Yeah, so the grocery stores currently are allowed to sell anything they can sell in the store through their home delivery option, and that would not change. That would be the same.
All right, next up.
Nora, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd ask town council to join us for the next two. All town council's working with. This is Select Board 6 and 7. These are both construction easements regarding the Conant Road culvert project.
Do you have any slides, Pat?
I do not.
Okay.
So, I don't know if you recall last year, there was a warrant article that allowed for this project to kind of take its first steps in moving forward. We're now at the point where we want to try and do it this summer. There's two construction easements we've got to take. One, we've got an agreement with one family already. We're working on the agreement with the second one. We made great progress this afternoon, so hopefully this is also a construction easement by agreement. This will allow to replace a culvert on Conant Road that will really protect the neighborhood from water situations, and more importantly, will protect the sewer pumping station down there from any potential damage from flooding. So it's really an important project, and more to follow as we try and finish up the negotiations.
I recall that last year, there was a possibility we might get a state grant.
Still in play.
Still in play.
Yeah. Yeah, I have not been monitoring the state grant. That's something Todd's been doing.
Todd's been doing,
I've been
right.
trying to deal with the real estate piece. So I would tell you that it looks, I believe it looks favorable for a state grant.
Okay.
Is there a financial expense associated with the construction easement
Yeah,
itself?
but it's de minimis. I've got to, I found out today my real estate appraiser retired the first of the year, so I've got to find a new one in the next couple of weeks. A temporary construction easement is not a high-cost situation. We're not permanently taking the land. And even if we were permanently taking the land, we're only taking a very small piece, so it's not big.
I had one in Walpole, and it was $8,000. When they're doing road construction, it took about 6 feet to the front of our property.
Did they really, that much? Wow.
And they say that's a lot, so.
That's a lot, yeah. I've seen them be $800, $1,000 for 2 or 3 feet of a front lawn.
Yeah, they do well.
Not my client.
And this project overall is obviously going to support a larger portion of the neighborhood, not just the folks that will be involved in the easement itself.
Yes. There's water, I think there's water issues in the neighborhood and times of high water and high rains, so this will help avoid problems.
Yeah, last spring it was really an issue.
Yep.
And then, of course, we went into a dry spell, so if you go down there right now, it looks like, what do we need this for? But we do.
It's actually, I watched the marsh across the street from the Carby building, and I know we're still in a drought situation, but the water's still pretty high down there.
For context, I think the biggest issue is that, for sewer to function, you rely on either gravity or pumping stations, and there's a pumping station down there that could flood, and if it floods, then our sewers aren't gonna work.
Right.
feel free to stay for Select Board 8.
I don't feel like moving.
Select Board 8. When the town implemented direct deposit in the early to mid 2000s, our predecessors did a great job and were well intended. There was through a list survey that I belonged to, there was a couple of questions that came up regarding Chapter 41, Section 41B. And working with town council and the town clerk, it appears that we did not accept this as part of a Mass General law. So what we're looking to do here, what we recommend to the board is to put this on the warrant, to dot the i's and cross the t's and complete that process. So again, we are still doing direct deposit, but under Massachusetts general law, the town has to accept a section of Chapter 41, Section 41B in order to complete that process.
Any questions from the
I
group?
think that completes the entertainment portion of our program this evening.
Oh, but there's more.
Just getting started.
It's just not you.
So, no, what I'm thinking about, Mike, is adjourning the select board.
Understood.
May I?
You can adjourn.
Sorry, just talk about the miscellaneous articles.
Oh.
To mention. So
I lied, sorry.
So there is currently 12 miscellaneous articles, and for those newer members, the miscellaneous articles are articles that we're still working on. There may be some legal matters that we're working out. Some of these articles may come off. Regardless of what happens with the miscellaneous articles, they have to go before the select board to vote them either off the warrant or to use a miscellaneous placeholder for something that would then be moved onto the warrant. So we have, and our objective is to work with the board as quickly as possible, so we can properly inform FinCom where we are with those miscellaneous articles, to try to alleviate any last minute changes. That's where we are.
Chris, I'll ask you the question I asked you today. You're not in a position today to give us any indication of what some of those miscellaneous articles might be, correct? Thank you.
And then just going back for the group to list articles, the charter review you saw on there, we didn't have the charter review committee come because from when they spoke to you last, there's one small change they made, you'll see highlighted in yellow based on everyone's kind of feedback, but otherwise it's the same thing you heard before, so no point in having them come kind of walk through all the detail. But if you guys want, just let me know. We can have them come to one of the next few meetings if you have any questions on that stuff.
And we're holding, I'll call them office hours at the Westwood Public Library. We had one this past Saturday, but we have one on the 25th, and I think we have one on February 8th from 10 to 12. So if you want to come and talk about the charter, the proposed charter changes, there'll be 2 or 3 of us there to be able to answer your questions one-on-one.
Thanks, Pat.
And they're also on our website. Right. On our website. So would you, is the FinCom anticipating charter review to make another presentation, or is the presentation that they made previously sufficient?
My feeling is the presentation they made is sufficient. If the group has specific questions, we can pass that along.
Okay.
But I'm seeing nods of head. I don't think we need them to present again.
Thank you very
I
much.
think we'll be okay.
Unless there's any other material changes.
Yeah. Yes. Of course.
Now can we complete the entertainment portion of the select board's presentation? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I move to adjourn the select board meeting.
Roll call. Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. And I vote aye as well. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Pat.
Now I will ask. You're welcome. Planning board articles. Nora, Elijah, Ellen, coming up. You have to open your meeting too.
I think, yeah, it looks like we do have a quorum, so I'll call our meeting to order once everyone moves up. Today's the 14th, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'll now call the January 14th, 2025 meeting of the Planning Board to order. We have a quorum. I don't have to take roll call because we're all in person, right? All right. So with that, piece of business out of the way. Thank you for having us here. Ellen Rawlings, Chair of the Planning Board. So just to kind of set the expectation, we have not started our public hearing process. So what we have for you tonight is a very high-level overview. The language for our warrant articles hasn't even been finalized yet, but we did want to, as we like to do, loop you in as early as possible with what we have. So this is really a high-level discussion. We will entertain questions, but we will have more for you at your February meeting. With that, I'll hand it over to Elijah.
Good evening, everyone. So I just want to start off, given that tomorrow would have been MLK's 96th birthday, I feel compelled to make the following statement. A few of the proposed planning board articles address housing. And before I get into them, I just wanted to touch on how they relate to fair housing. I'm going to read an excerpt in part that can be found on the website of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, known as HUD. On April 11th, 1968, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1968, which was meant as a follow-up to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The 1968 Act expanded on previous acts and prohibited discrimination concerning the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin, sex, and as amended, handicap and family status. Title 8 of the Act is also known as the Fair Housing Act of 1968. The enactment of the Federal Fair Housing Act on April 11, 1968, came only after a long and difficult journey. From 1966 to 1967, Congress regularly considered the Fair Housing Bill, but it failed to garner a strong enough majority for its passage. However, when Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated on April 4th, 1968, President Lyndon Johnson utilized this national tragedy to urge for the bill's speedy congressional approval. Since the 1966 open housing marches in Chicago, Dr. King's name had been closely associated with fair housing legislation. President Johnson viewed the act as a fitting memorial to MLK's life work and wished to have the act passed before Dr. King's funeral in Atlanta. So I implore members of the Finance and Warrant Commission and any attendees to please consider refraining from any comments that may trigger any state and or federal offenses related to fair housing. This means any discriminatory comments concerning, but not limited to, the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, persons with disability, age, and family status. For anyone who wants to learn more about fair housing, I encourage you to view the January 7, 2025 Planning Board meeting, where our Housing and Land Use Planner, Amanda Wolf, put together a clear and informative training, which can be found on our town website. Without further ado, I will get into the presentation of the articles. Thank you. So, we'll be covering 6 articles presented by the Planning Board. The first one is related to accessory apartments. Before you have a copy of the printout so you can read along. The first proposed article, a purpose and overview of it, is that on August 6th, 2024, Governor Healy signed into law the Affordable Homes Act, and that allowed ADUs up to 900 square feet to be built by right in single-family zoning districts. This was in part to address the housing crisis that is ongoing in the state, and as it relates to the ability to enforce the law, it will be in effect starting February 2nd. So it's pertinent that the town look to amend its current bylaw to match that of the state. The draft regulations were finalized on December 6, 2024. Some of those parameters allow for one ADU on a single-family property by right. It strikes the owner occupancy need for the ADUs. There are also some parking requirements that are relaxed, such as off-street parking cannot be required within half a mile of transit station, and then no more than one for any other ADUs. This also, adds a protected use to ADUs, and the picture to my right kind of goes over what type of ADUs they are. There's detached units. There's attached units to the main dwelling. There may be an interior upper level unit, such as an attic space, or an interior lower level unit, such as a basement. There could be an above garage unit, such as a loft, or a garage conversion. And then also it lifts the density and unit caps that municipalities can enact on ADUs.
Is it okay if I ask you a quick question, just because I think clarifying this will help me follow? Are these things embedded in these articles, things that would get us compliant with state law, or are these things that we're seeking to do on our own volition?
Yes, so the next slide kind of goes through some of the points that
So it's a
we would
mix?
have. Yeah, it's a mix.
Okay, that answers my question, because it'll help me follow as you go along. Thank you.
No. So for Westwood, we'd be looking to potentially amend section 8.5. That would change the name of accessory apartments to accessory dwelling units, making sure that one ADU will be allowed by right. That still means someone has to get a building permit or a certificate of occupancy. It removes that owner occupancy requirement. The floor area and parking requirements will be adjusted to conform with the law. A special permit process will still be in place for anything over one ADU, so if there's a second one that someone wanted to go to, they'd still have to do that special permit process. And then the warrant article would have to be reviewed in light of HLC's guidelines once they're posted, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, formerly known as DHCD. Questions, George?
For those who, another name for, the common name for an ADU is an in-law apartment. And that's just what I understood it to be. I two questions. It's owner occupied, so that means the owner must be there, but it used to be that you had to be related to the person in the accessory apartment. Is that still the case?
I believe we actually removed that a few years ago because that was not allowable under state and or federal law. So we were not allowed to have that requirement, so that's been gone for a little while now.
And are all the other requirements, so the current people in the town that have in-laws, are they grandfathered in, or do they have to go out and get a new floor area and parking requirements, new permits, or are they grandfathered in with the prior rules?
I can take that. So anyone who has a current special permit for an accessory apartment, they can continue to use that the accessory apartment, and it could qualify as a protected ADU. If they're looking for a new apartment that they don't have currently, then they would have to follow this procedure. The changes that the planning board is considering, and they haven't discussed them in detail, they will discuss them at their hearing on February 11th, but the changes that they are considering are intended to bring us into conformance with the state law. As of February 2nd, our section 8.5, our accessory apartment section of our bylaw, simply becomes invalid. We cannot require a special permit, and we cannot hold anyone to the requirements on their existing special permits. So someone who has a special permit now has an owner occupancy requirement. As of February 2nd, that owner occupancy requirement is no longer enforceable.
So they're grandfathered.
It's no longer enforceable until you fix
To redo the net.
We have to remove it because the state is now saying you can't have an owner occupancy requirement. So that goes away altogether if we're going to be in compliance with state law.
There are some provisions in our current section 8.5 that can remain, that are the same as the state requirements. For instance, we can still require that an accessory apartment, or an ADU as we'll now call it, can be no smaller than 500 square feet and no larger than 900 square feet. We still can require that it has 2 means of egress that are separate as far as they possibly can be. But most of the other requirements, owner occupancy is no longer allowed. We currently have a requirement that does not allow an exterior staircase for an upper unit. That is no longer enforceable.
What about setback requirements?
All setback requirements would still apply, building height requirements. So anything that you're required through our zoning bylaw just for any accessory structure still applies to an accessory dwelling unit.
I want to revisit George's question. To me, this seems like everything we're doing is to be in compliance with the law. So we're not going any above and beyond. We can still enforce things that were in our current bylaw, but we are just complying. So like this is literally, we're already there, we just don't know it, and this just cleans things up.
This removes the sections of our bylaw that are not compatible with state law. It's not looking to do more than that. When the planning board discusses it at their hearing, they can discuss, there are some sections of the state law and the guidelines that have some flexibility to them, and the planning board will discuss how they want to apply that flexibility.
Thanks, Norm.
So while we're on the Q&A part, if you don't mind, because this is the question that I had in my mind when I asked. So it says, I think the 4th bullet point says floor area and parking requirements will be adjusted to conform with the law. And the parking requirement was, we will not be able to require off-street parking within a half-mile of transit. So my question is, and I think I have the answer because it says that to comply with the new law. So the law states that we can't do that. But does it consider or allow for the consideration for availability of on-street parking? So if the person lives on a street where on-street parking is forbidden, and we forbid them to provide off-street parking, that puts them in a bind. So I'm wondering if there's consideration for that.
It's a good question.
Yes.
As far as
So
looks like Amanda has some insights.
Hi, I'm
Phone a friend.
Amanda. I'm the housing and land use planner. So it's all about requirements. So a homeowner that's building an ADU can still go above and beyond that because they're not going to want to create a parking situation on their property that inconveniences them or a neighbor. So what basically we can't say, oh, every ADU has to have 2 spaces dedicated to it. It's just minimum of 1. If they want to go above and beyond, they can.
So they can do it, but we're not going to require them to do it, and that's what we're saying.
I think we
Perfect.
can't require them under this new state
Right.
legislation.
Perfect.
We can't require it at all within a half mile of a train station. But I would agree, I think most folks would be likely to want to do that anyway. And we can't require, what is it, more than 1 space per ADU?
More than 1 per ADU, unless it's within that half mile of a transit station, then it becomes no.
0.
Yeah.
Thank you. That clarifies it.
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
So this might be a silly question. So where this may conflict with some of our current zoning in terms of like the size of your lot and how large you can build and some of those other compliance for frontage and in different elements, that no longer is applicable. This will override.
No, my understanding is things like height requirements, setbacks, all the building requirements to build an accessory structure on your lot would still apply. So if you've got a half-acre lot, you would still have to abide by the setbacks and the height requirements and the frontage and all of that, building the ADU. It means, currently we have, I believe it's 2%. We will only issue permits for 2% of the total number of housing units in the town. We can no longer impose a cap. That to me is one of the larger changes. But my understanding is that as of today, we can still enforce the other aspects of our building and zoning bylaws that would apply to any structure.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like in general, like are we going to have every lot essentially now be capable of building an accessory
If they have
dwelling
space-
unit.
If they have
Yeah.
space, that is the fundamental change to address the housing shortage, is to, take away the ability for towns like Westwood to limit. They want to actually encourage building, but if you have a lot that is, your setbacks are maxed out, you can't do that. We'll still, you wouldn't be able to do it. But this literally could, every, resident in Westwood that has a house with a bunch of space, they could build an ADU. And the planning board and the town wouldn't be able to say, no, you can't. And so that theoretically would be a good thing, and that would be creating more housing. Obviously, that would have impact on the town. Nora, do you want to answer that better?
No, I think you answered it well. I just want to note that this applies equally to every town and every city in Massachusetts, so everyone will be facing the same requirements. And I also want to point out that we have had allowances for accessory apartment special permits since, I believe, 1992. And in that time, we originally only allowed up to 1% of the total number of single and two-family homes. We increased it to 2%. We still have only 63 households out of 5,800 households that have taken advantage of that. And special permits have not been denied. So it's not a case where people were not able to get it. Anyone who applied for a special permit was able to. So there hasn't been the level of demand that people fear. There may be increased demand because we are in a housing shortage, but I don't see this as something that will cause an awful lot of development in Westwood.
I think that's an important thing that you identified, Nora, is that none have been denied, right?
With all respect, Nora, it's not easy. Maybe nobody's been denied, but it's not as easy to get one having gone through the process. It does take, I believe it's either the planning or the zoning board. Zoning, excuse me, the zoning board do have the right to say, you have to do this with your landscape, or you have to do this with your house, or you have to do this, this, and this. Otherwise, you may not get it. It's not, with all respect, Nora, I know you may disagree, but having gone through the process, it's not a 1-2 punch.
But are you saying that because of the complexity, people just don't do it? Or are you saying that people get denied?
I'm not giving an opinion on what other people do. I'm saying, having gone through the process, it's not an easy process or a inexpensive process.
So if I can just piggyback on that a little
You
bit,
just state your
Kathleen.
name again.
Yeah, Kathleen Wynn, 10 Cedar Hill Drive, planning board member. I do just want to say, this is every city and town in the state. There's no reason to believe that this would affect Westwood disproportionately to the other towns that are now living in the same law. That again, we are just getting into compliance with what is and making it understandable for residents.
One final question. By making these changes ourselves, do we in fact give ourselves more control than if we don't change it, and somebody then could challenge our entire current bylaw?
That's a good question. As my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, as of February 2nd, our bylaw, as it stands, is unenforceable. So if we actually craft a bylaw that is compliant, but where there's flexibility, we choose to exercise that in what ways work for our community, I believe we'd be in a better position than if we did nothing.
I'll also add that, oh my goodness, I just drew a blank as I come up here. So unlike the MBTA Communities Act, where it was compliance determination, with this, essentially the ADUs become under the same law as the Dover Amendment. So just like educational uses or religious uses, we have limited say, now protected use ADU is added to that list. So it overrides the bylaw no matter what, but it also opens the town up to vulnerabilities if we have a bylaw that conflicts with state law that we don't want to do. So if we comply, even though there's no compliance, it just makes for a smoother process.
Thanks.
Good questions. And if this is working, I think it's fine for us to, because we have 6 articles to talk about, to take your questions after each one. I think that's working.
Thank you.
All right, so the second article is related to affordable housing. So the purpose, is, the planning board considered this, being that there is a housing crisis that we've kind of mentioned. There's been increases to the area median income, so that's led to unaffordable rents, which were previously considered affordable. This aim is to prevent displacement of residents, homelessness, and reliance on assistance. This also increases options for, income-restricted households. You think of, teachers, public service sector folks, seniors, young professionals, first-time home buyers, and things of that nature. And this also eliminates repetitive language that's found throughout the articles. And as I mentioned before, DHCD is now HLC, so we want to make sure that all of that language is updated. To go into some of the, very high level, but it's, currently we have a affordability requirement of 80%. So the proposal is to look at a mix of both 80, 50, and 30. That, I just want to stress, that does not change the percentage of units in a project, but it allows for a greater mix of affordability. So in a 25-unit building, 21 units will still be market rate. However, those 4 units that used to be 80%, if this were to be taken up, it would be 2 that are 80%, 1 that's 50%, and 1 that's 30% to add for better affordability.
So I do have a question on this one, and this is more of a mechanical question with regard to how we enforce it and how it works mechanically. This is my own ignorance. So I understand, the percentage of AMI. Does this relate only to rental properties, or if this were to condo and sell as a condo, does that also apply?
Rental and ownership.
Okay, and so I'm trying to figure out, so does it's the builder that would subsidize this effort, right? And do they achieve that by just selling par units at a discount, or do they build them to spec such that they meet that requirement?
So basically, you're supposed to be able to not distinguish what a market rate unit is from an affordable unit. So it'd still be the same type of apartment for.
Oh, so the 30% could be a 3-bedroom condo, and the 80% could be a 3-bedroom condo, and then the full could be a 3-bedroom condo?
That's correct.
Okay. So I guess those individuals would still be subject to the same taxation?
I believe so, depending on what.
The taxation rate would be the same, but their value would be affected by the percentage AMI. So the value of a property that's affordable to a household earning 30% AMI, that property is valued lower.
So they don't get to realize capital gains on that? Is that limited?
They do realize gains. So I can give an example. We have properties in town in 2 neighborhoods that were developed in the 1990s with affordable single-family homes. Those were all done at 8% AMI. The property value was, $96,000 or $100,000 homes, depending on whether it was a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom. Those were the 2 amounts that the affordable households paid for the properties, where market rate owners at that time paid $350,000, $375,000. Today, their value is comparable to the difference between the market rate and the affordable one. There was each property has a deed rider. The deed rider has a discount rate. So if you paid $100,000 for a house that your next door neighbor with the exact same house paid $300,000, your discount rate was 33%. So now, 30 years later, when your property is assessed at market rate, then you're entitled to sell it for 33% of that market rate. And you've been taxed all these years for a property value of 33%.
Got it, thank you.
George, also the builder takes the builder's subsidizing it.
Yeah, no, that was very helpful for me, thank you.
That was a great clarifier, that helped. That was a great illustration.
So with that being said, with the builder paying for that, essentially subsidizing everything above that, do we have any concerns that that's going to continue? Really, the builder's not going to take that expense on? Are we concerned that that is going to continue to push the market rates up even higher? Because there's going to be a gap that will have to be filled. I don't know if there's any data that anybody has.
I can try to answer this. So 22 Everett Street is probably the most recent example we've had. This was approved in December of 2023, I think we were in. In that case, it was 160 units total. 24 of those were subsidized. The bylaw only required 80% AMI, but we got the developer to agree to include, was it 360% AMI? Yeah. And the market rates are still the market rates. Like, they're going to still charge the rent that they would charge in any other property. And in that case, even though we had both 80% and 60% AMI units, it still was a net benefit of $500,000 a year expected from that property.
So,
160 units, yeah.
So as part of the MBTA Communities Act, we had to do a market report where another company came in, a consulting company, and looked at how feasible it is for a developer to build with the affordability requirements, and they still make plenty of gains out of these projects, so it doesn't deter them.
So is this something today you're already putting into practice, basically, with some, like what you're writing down, like what you're proposing for an article? It sounds like it might already be taking place today in some situations.
So in the
This is a
case,
requirement.
so in the case of the 22 Everett Street, because it was a special permit, the planning board had a little more flexibility in, negotiating with the proponent.
Okay. So you can put it into practice today, but only when it's a special permit process.
And when there's leverage.
Right,
They
exactly.
don't always have leverage.
Yeah, exactly.
If I can add, we also, so even though the bylaw requires 80% AMI, there's countless different housing programs. So for example, the Highland Glen Apartments, they receive 2 subsidies, one called low-income housing tax credits and another called Section 8 project-based vouchers. So what that allows them to do is, even though it was approved at 80% AMI back in the 70s, half of their units are actually rented out for 60% AMI because of the tax credit. And then the remaining portion, households only pay 30% of their personal income. So we already have affordability levels that are much lower than this in Westwood. We're just codifying it so that we're able to respond to the housing issues that we've seen.
Just out of curiosity, what's the AMI for this area? Thank you for
I
being
think
so
it's the
prepared.
state, right?
So, I don't have, without any adjustments, it's roughly 150,000. Right now, 80% AMI, the household of one income limit is $91,000. That means a 1-bedroom apartment that's supposed to be subsidized can be rented for $2,400 a month. So affordable housing isn't really affordable, is the intention behind this article. By lowering the AMI, we can actually rent it at a rate that's reasonable to a senior or a single parent or teacher on a limited income.
Ryan, did you have a question?
Yeah, two questions. Nora, have we benchmarked this town compared to like other towns in terms of like these percentages of 30 to 50, the idea? I'd just be curious to see, what other towns are doing.
That's a good question. Do we have that data?
We do not have that data. But it's something that we can
look at. Absolutely.
And then just, like speaking in terms of like the percentages, I know the numbers in terms of rent are high, but conceptually, like when I think about this, if the average, salary of the town, say 5 years ago, was 100K, right? You look at 80% of that, that was 80K. Fast forward 5 years, right? Theoretically, both of those numbers should be going up at the rate of inflation, right? And I just finished because I'm probably thinking about this wrong. But if the average goes up 20% and if the average goes up 20%, you would think that salaries in general would be going up 20% because of inflation. So I would think that this is kind of like, this is this is a mathematical exercise versus the rate that rent is going up versus the rate of inflation over time. We're saying that rent is going up at a higher rate than inflation, because if inflation goes up, in theory, your salaries are going up, and so 80% is just consistent over a period of time. I was just curious if you had any of that data in terms of like how quickly the rent is rising in comparison to inflation.
So I can just answer at least part of the AMI. It's not just based on Westwood specific. It's a regional track that's set by HUD, and so it encompasses the greater Boston area that goes all the way up into New Hampshire and south.
Essentially 495.
All the way to New Hampshire, really?
To southern New Hampshire, 495. The metropolitan area is the AMI.
Got it.
And it's an extremely expensive AMI compared to other parts.
Thank you.
I can also add that right now, the price to income ratio of household earnings versus the cost of a home in Westwood is, hold on, it just scrolled on me. In 2023, it's 6.3. For comparison, the last time it was that high was in 2006 at 6.6, whereas historically, it's always been closer to 3 or 4. So the cost of housing is dramatically rising compared to the incomes of individuals.
Sorry, so that's a multiple of household income to home value. So 6.3 times household income. Wow.
Sorry, Kathleen, me again. Just while we're talking big picture, as a member of planning board, one of the things that when I look at this, I think about not just people's income when they first come in and how that moves and changes, but also how life events can change your ability to stay where you are if you're a Westwood resident. And one of the things that our comprehensive plan speaks to is people wanted more housing choice, not just so that they had more choices over their lifespan to stay in town in different ways. So this is one of the things that I see reflected in this proposed article. It isn't why the article is there, so that everybody makes Kate and E happy. That's not why it's here. But it lines up with our comprehensive plan, and it lines up with the way people are living.
Any other questions? Do you have a question?
Breezy, 32 Webster Street. When we're talking about 22 Everett Street and all of these other potential buildings that have a variety of apartments, are they deeded and memorialized that all of these, when we designate affordable, is it deed restricted that it's in perpetuity? Or can the developer say, oh, for 20 years, I'm going to rent it out, and now I'm going to, raise the rent? I'd like to understand that, please.
If it's a home ownership property, it's deeded in perpetuity. That was not the case back in the 1990s when Westwood had properties. They were deeded for a 50-year period. Currently, any home ownership property is deeded in perpetuity. A rental property is regulated under a, regulatory agreement, and the regulatory agreement is for as long as the building exists, or that property owner uses it for the purpose that it was approved for. So if the planning board grants a special permit for apartments, 15% of those apartments must be affordable, and the regulatory agreement requires that affordability to be in place for as long as those apartments are rented.
Even if there's a change of ownership in that apartment complex?
Yes. Yes, then the regulatory
Still standing,
agreement.
still being rented, boom.
Yes, it runs with the land.
All right, and there'll be more opportunity at the planning board meeting on February 11th and the subsequent FinCom hearing to go in greater depth.
They wouldn't.
So the third planning board article is to look at rezoning 216 to 310 Providence Highway. That is the Lambert site. Excuse me. The request was made by the property owner. Recently, the ownership changed hands at Lambert's, and so they were looking at the site that is currently a pre-existing non-conforming use, and looking to bring it into the parcel into compliance with a current commercial use. So looking at changing it from single residence B to highway business B to not only encourage physical improvements and investments, but as you may know, members, last year, this parcel was also included in the Mumford Overlay District, so it was somewhat of a recognition that that site has a commercial use currently. There's the proponents here as well, in the event that there's any site-specific questions, but yeah, sorry, before I step ahead, but yeah, that's what we're proposing at the moment.
So to me, this is just a housekeeping. We're effectively updating it to what it is.
Essentially.
Essentially.
Does this allow them to do any further redevelopment if we were to make the transition? They obviously now will have the full extent. Have we investigated what the full extent of the change, what that would allow them to do on the parcel, separate from what they're currently doing?
So what it does is it allows them to develop the property in accordance with our bylaw. Right now, it's a pre-existing non-conforming use, and every one of the businesses there are pre-existing non-conforming use. So to change those businesses, their path is to go to the zoning board and get a special permit for an alteration of a pre-existing non-conforming use. If the zoning is changed to highway business, then they're entitled to develop highway business uses that are permitted in the zoning in accordance with the zoning requirements.
So it'll expand the uses potentially.
So I can't say it's actually an expansion of the uses because the zoning board can change one non-conforming use to another non-conforming use. In some ways, it could be more limiting, but it would allow all the uses that are currently allowed in highway business. So the uses that this town has approved for its business districts.
All right, just a quick question. So if right now the owner wants to change from a nail salon to a bagel shop, they have to come get a new special permit to do that?
They do, yes. So if they're changing in the same category, retail to retail or restaurant to restaurant, then they don't need a special permit. But if they want to change the category from one use to a different use, then they would need to go to the zoning board. So there's time that's involved in that, there's cost, there's delay, there's uncertainty, which is discouraging to both the landlord and potential
It's also
tenants.
just kind of nonsense.
And if you lay side by side what's permitted in a highway business
Yeah.
with what's permitted in single residence B with a special permit, you actually see there are some uses that are not permitted in highway business that could be permitted now, which would be detrimental to the neighborhood. So it's not only is it better because the planning board has more control under highway business, but it also would result in an increase in valuation of the whole property.
Yes, it increases the likelihood of improvement of the property, and it provides greater certainty to the neighborhood, to the property owner, and to the tenants.
Justin Ferris, I represent the owner. So just to speak to what Nora highlighted, we brought in one new tenant since we've owned the property, and it's really an extra 2 months and extra meetings when you're just utilizing it for the commercial use that's been there for 50+ years. And we intend to invest a significant amount of money upgrading the facade of the building and considering other improvements. But without that proper zoning, it's really not worth the risk. So it's something we need to have in place to consider those improvements.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. So you're sitting on an empty unit for 2 months while you're waiting for the permit right now?
No, I've actually had multiple other tenants approach, and for example, I've had a gym tenant that gets scared off by the single residence. It's extra time for them. They want to get going, and they don't want to spend the extra money on extra meetings. At an ice cream shop, same thing. So there's plenty of interest. There's also interest from tenants who want to see upgrades to the facade, because it's been the same way since the 70s. We threw a coat of paint on it. Looks better, but there's much work to be done there.
You're talking about the whole strip? You guys own the whole strip?
Yeah, it's the two buildings.
Thanks.
Okay.
Nada?
I'm not poo-pooing this, but if I recall correctly, there was a citizen petitioned article a couple of years ago, and town meeting voted it down. So I don't know what precipitated the planning board to pick this up.
So the planning board chose to sponsor this on the request of the new owners of the property, who explained to the planning board the difficulties that Justin just explained to you in keeping tenants and getting new tenants, and the planning board did feel that it was appropriate to rezone the property. This was brought up as a petition article several years ago. I recall it being presented to the planning board by a prior owner to request sponsorship, maybe around 2009, 2010, and the planning board at that time was not interested. It's a different owner, and the current owner has plans for improving the facility, and the planning board would like to encourage that.
Awesome. So proposed Article 4 is related to the Mumford Overlay District. Just want to stress that this is a placeholder in the event that there are no changes from a compliance standpoint with HLC. This would be removed and not put into consideration. I also want to stress that the Massachusetts Supreme Court decision does not change the applicability of the MBTA Communities Law to Westwood in relation to the Mumford District. And so we really just have this here in the event that we may need to make some minor changes based on compliance.
Any questions?
So Article 5, the FMUOD Overlay District and ARO District as it relates to East Street. We are looking at adding the FMUOD 5 district to 131 East Street and amending a use to allow for a hotel with a planning board special permit. Also potentially looking at amending the Administrative Research Office, ARO district, use to allow for a hotel with a Zoning Board of Appeals permit. This property has been, we've been approached by different real estate proponents looking into this specific site, and so just as a good practice of, planning, we thought that we proposed this to maintain the commercial use that it has and to avoid losing it to a residential use, which could then impact the split tax rate.
This is the Meditech property.
That's correct.
So what can be built there now versus what you're proposing, I guess?
So what could be built there now is, office, administrative, research type of uses. I believe there's senior living that could potentially be proposed there. We did have a few people inquiring into that.
So I can give you a list of all the uses that are currently allowed in the ARO, and I can give you a list of all of the uses that are currently allowed in the Flexible Multiple Use Overlay District 5. Neither of those districts, the underlying district or the overlying district, allow hotel currently, and that's the proposed change here. I also want to point out that the two options that are given here were developed by staff and have yet to be discussed by the planning board. The planning board will discuss this at their hearing on February 11th. So just to go through the uses, in an ARO zone, you're currently allowed to have professional services, so law firm, architect's office, something along those lines, a business service establishment, an office of a healthcare professional, a research and development facility, a golf course, a campground, wildlife preserve, fishing grounds, or nonprofit religious educational use, an exempt public religious or nonprofit educational use, a non-exempt educational use, so that would be a private educational use, a child care facility, an agricultural use exempt or non-exempt, a farm stand exempt,
a municipal facility, an extension of an existing cemetery, solar facilities, other solar, roof-mounted solar, or large-scale solar facilities, accessory retail uses, including cafeterias, snack bars, fast food, gift shop, etc., that are within a principal office building. You're also allowed by special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals, a residential retirement community, a nursing or convalescent home, an assisted living residence, a child care facility in a new building, essential services, so that's something along the lines of utility companies, public utilities as well, funeral home, commercial recreation indoor, so that's something like a basketball court, medical marijuana establishment, parking garage, drive-through service, and a temporary structure for not more than 1 year extended up to 3 years. Those are all the uses that are currently allowed in the ARO zone without making any changes. The uses that are permitted within the FMUOD 5 district are a bank or financial institution, which would fall under those ARO uses, business service establishment, a coffee shop, a commercial recreation indoor facility, a cultural facility, art gallery, or a museum. That's different. So that's something that would be allowed there with the FMUOD that's not in one of the current uses unless it was a nonprofit exempt use. Educational facility exempt or non-exempt, an ice cream shop, a municipal use, office of a healthcare professional, personal services establishment, printing, copying, publishing establishment, professional service establishment, restaurant with or without entertainment less than 10,000 square feet, retail sales and services establishment less than 10,000 square feet, a shuttle service system, and a fast order food establishment that's interior to an office or non-retail building, and a research and development facility. So there's a lot of overlap between the two, and most of the uses that are allowed under FMUOD are also allowed under the ARO. The main difference would be the hotel use that's not allowed under either of those, and that's the reason that staff is presenting this to the planning board and asking for their consideration.
Thank you.
I just want to make a quick comment, and maybe there's a question in here. Adding this hotel, provision would give us most likely the greatest potential growth in tax revenue. So as we face so many other challenges, this would open up, significant growth that could be material going forward. So that's the big reason for adding this change. So I don't know if there's a question there, if you just want to confirm that that's, and then I think as we go forward, I'd like to maybe have a little bit more data tied to that so that the board can look at that, maybe a projection over 10 years.
Sure, yeah, and that is exactly the reason we're proposing this. So the property has been vacant for a number of years. I have to say it has not been released to the market. I have not spoken to the current owners about their intentions to sell the property, but I have heard from a number of people who are interested in buying it. And I can tell you that every one of the people I've heard from that's interested in buying it are interested in buying it for a residential use, whether that's a residential retirement community or assisted living facility, something under its current zoning. And the concern there is that not only would that not produce the highest value for the town, but it moves the property from the commercial side of the ledger to the residential side of the ledger. And in doing that, further jeopardizes the town's ability to continue with its split tax rate. So any commercial use is more profitable from a fiscal standpoint to the town than any residential use, and a hotel use is the use that's most profitable for the town.
Thank you.
Right, because you get the taxes and you get the hotels and meals taxes.
Yes.
Just listening to that full list, the other thing that jumped out at me that's currently allowed are things like nonprofits and agricultural, which are, we could
They're
be
wonderful,
looking-
but not in this context.
Right, we're looking, that makes the switch from commercial to residential look excellent. So that just jumped out at me. I hadn't actually reviewed the full use of what's allowed. And I guess my question that I think I already know the answer to, any of those allowed uses that are allowed by right, if someone were to come forward with that under the current zoning, it would be very hard to say no to it, right? So that's, I guess for me, that's food for thought. That hadn't really processed until I heard that full list. So, yes, we will be discussing this at our February 11th meeting as well. Were there any other questions or comments on this overview for Article 5, proposed Article 5?
No? Yes, home.
And
We're almost
There was
there.
one, and there was one.
Figuratively and literally.
And yes, the last one is related to housekeeping amendments. This is kind of a generic year-by-year thing that we keep in case there's errors or we need to just clarify certain sections of the zoning bylaw or zoning map.
I'll just make a comment. The changes you made last year were great. Helped the town, helped the citizens be able to understand the zoning, et cetera. So more to come on that.
Yes. And that completes our presentation. And thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Yes, were there any
move.
other,
We
were
need to
there,
make a motion.
were there any other questions at all?
Can I just make a comment?
Yes.
I very much appreciated your opening. I thought you framed your presentation extremely well. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem.
All right.
Madam Chair, motion to close.
Yes.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
The planning board meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for the format. That was easy to follow.
That was great.
We turned that
Not much from a chair's update perspective. I think the next two meetings will be either virtual or virtual and hybrid, knowing that when we get into those last three meetings, we're going to be in person. And based on the number of warrant articles we're looking at, we're in for some long meetings in March. So that's my updates in terms of the meetings. Mike and I sent out a note earlier about, working to coordinate the committee meetings with town staff to, what we might try to do to minimize their time on different days is try to stack the committee meetings after each other on a 1 day or 2 days. So Allison will help with that when the time comes. We're still not quite there yet, but pretty soon we will be. And then this year, when it comes to the presentations to the group in the beginning of March, historically, it's been a lot of going through stuff we've heard 2 or 3 times and then adding in your comments. I'd like to take a different direction with this for this year. And really what I'd like each committee to do is just come up with a couple slides, let's say 1, 2, or 3. Really give an executive summary overview of the key things you want us to know, kind of the key questions you had, that type of format, rather than, I'll use education, for example, because I led that for a few years. Rather than take 15 of Tim's slides and pull them out and present them and speak to them, or actually have him here to speak to half of them when the questions come. Really just look as more of an executive summary format in terms of laying out things for the group, because we have a lot of articles, a lot of stuff going on. So we'll see how that works and welcome any feedback during and after on that, but hopefully it's a little cleaner. We'll still have, we still have our write-ups that go in the book. We're gonna have 40-ish articles to split up. We're not quite there yet on how we'll shake that out, but one of the next few meetings we'll kind of start to think about that. So when we go into those March meetings, everyone kind of knows, all right, what article am I going to be writing up, so I can kind of focus on that during our discussion. So that's my update on what's to come.
How does the voting work, Bill? Say for example, we just had that last planning board meeting, we went through 600 articles. Are we voting on each individual article?
Yeah, so on the meeting in March, hopefully we can keep it 1 day. If we can, it'll be 2. But we will go through, we'll have discussion on it first, and then we'll go through into like any other updates or something like that might happen on any of the articles last minute. And then we'll go into our own session and we'll go article by article. Allison will keep track of the vote, and then someone will be responsible for writing up that article. So it's both it's writing up the context of the kind of conversation, especially if it's unanimous, it's more straightforward. But if there's, we had quite a few articles last year where it was like 8-7 or not, like it was close. Yeah. So that's where you got to get that opposing view in that write-up, and might be a little more complex. But especially for the new folks, we'll help you to you'll get the articles that are kind of the year-to-year articles that are a little more straightforward as opposed to
There's a
the
couple of ones I
complex
would like to that I would like to touch on, but whatever, I'll let you determine that, Bill. Question, are you proofreading them all? So are you guys proofreading?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, we'll proofread, and then our intent is, I will track changes, so any changes that we have, we will share back with you for any feedback or additional discussion before we finalize.
Sounds good.
We have a little more time this year. Last year, I think we had like 48 hours to go through stuff, but we have a little more time this year because we will vote at the end of March also on every article except FS1.
Yeah.
We will not vote on FS1 until the end of April because we will not vote till we have a number. So our discussion in March will not contain that article, all the others, and then we'll figure out the timeline. You'll probably have a week or two to write all those up, and then, a couple of us will take on, probably Mike and I, the FS1 one at the end. That one we'll have to turn around quick.
Sounds good.
Bill, we have a few new members. Can you perhaps maybe redistribute the subcommittee list with the assignments?
Yes.
With considered of the new members?
We'll do that, and what we'll also do too is, I can't remember if it's online, if not, we'll send it. The last few years of the Warrant articles, I always found it helpful. I think I have like 5 or 6 stacks of books in my cabinet to like when I'm to go back and look at some of them and look at the language and get a feel for them. So we'll make sure that gets distributed or posted to the OneDrive maybe if we don't have them on the website so that you guys can get a feel for that.
Great.
For that
So
too.
do we all, do we all see the write-ups before they're finalized, or no? No.
No, you'll just do your own write-up, and then we'll see all of them, and then you'll see them when they come in the book to your mailbox.
Yeah. But we'll certainly, for instance, on the subcommittee you're on with me, we'll have gone through everything, but that's different than the actual articles and writing up the articles. That's after the vote, and that's individually assigned. And so you would write it up, then you would share it with us. We'll go through and make our edits, send it back to you. Maybe there's a couple of rounds back and forth. The newer members, though, again, they're to be very straightforward articles. You're not tackling some of the contested or the tenured folks will tackle that.
And all of the articles essentially will end up in there. Our vote is just really for how we're going to format and present it in the book. Everything's being presented. It's
Yes,
just the format
every article, there's some.
that's being put forth is going to be in the book.
Absolutely.
Right, absolutely.
Okay.
With our vote, and then a write-up, an explanation of our position.
Of the dialogue, right?
But if we don't vote in favor of something, I think it still goes to town meeting. We don't have the authority to block something from going.
Correct, and so if we, because we had this a year or two ago, we had 1 or 2 that were indefinite postponement, so it goes in the book, the voted indefinite postponement, and then there's commentary around what the concerns were and why.
And all of the voting and indefinite postponement, what it means, voting yes for one versus no, we will be so explicit when we're going over the vote. So it'll be very, very clear, because a no isn't always no, if that makes any sense.
Can I just offer,
confuse things more.
The way I always look at it, our role is to inform the residents who don't have the opportunity to take part in these meetings, and we're just providing them our insight.
Yeah, we're just recommending that the town vote a certain way.
They
We're
in
not
turn
actually voting.
can dismiss it at town meeting and go.
Which they
did last
Which
year.
they absolutely have.
Yeah.
Which is great. I mean, again,
I don't know if it's great.
Well, it's great to me that they have the right. It's the purest form of government.
Democracy, yeah.
Bill, I wanted to bring this up earlier, and this is in terms of informational on a capital long-term planning. We were talking about FS1, but some things have come up that have been on the horizon, but I think they're coming a lot quicker. And the example is the middle school. Twice in the past month, the middle school was evacuated because of a maintenance scare. I mean, it was flat out, it was a gas leak. That's as pretty scary as you can get with children. They were once they were evacuated and sent home. Once they were evacuated so urgently, they were shipped to the high school. Eventually, somebody's gonna get their, get all huff and puffing, and the middle school is gonna come on the horizon a lot quicker than what we anticipated. Now, I am not giving an opinion right now, and I want to make it clear, I'm not giving an opinion right now, yay or nay, on any project on the that's right on the table. But if in fact the fire station goes through, it's going to be an override. I mean, that's, I'm pretty sure that's a foregone conclusion. The middle school, after doing a little research, will cost more than the Pine Hill School. That's going to be another override. But when you're talking about safety and kids, and it's not an opinion of safety, the school's been evacuated twice in a month because of deferred maintenance. I think we have to start, I'm sure there's a long-term, I know there's a long-term capital planning committee, but I think that's not as long-term as we think. I think it's coming a lot quicker, because if those problems keep happening, parents are gonna pull their kids and send them to different schools. I mean, it's gonna get bad.
I think that, if I remember right, the school's like capital, I don't know capital analysis, I can't think of what it is right now after the long day.
Yeah.
But I think it's supposed to be done at some point, March or April. And then I think once they have that, then the school committee will review.
Oh, you're 100% right. I just,
plan.
this committee, I thought, needs to, we can't have a blinders on saying, just looking at one project and ignoring what else is going on in the town.
I agree.
Gotta take it one at a time, but
Yeah.
you gotta keep an eye on that, the entire picture too.
We've asked for several years that the town provide us with a priority list of capital projects, and I haven't seen it, so.
I'm not sure what more of a priority you can get than our children being shipped out because of a gas
Well,
leak. I mean,
as you mentioned, George, there are a lot of projects around town, and I'd like to see what the town administration thinks is the top priority.
There's only, I mean, you could feed so many people from pizza, there's only so much money to go around, but,
And here's the thing, I mean, well, we as the FinCom have to, have that in mind in the long
Yeah.
term. We also have a job to do, which is to consider the warrant articles that are brought before us. And so I think it's a little bit challenging. And so the town has
Absolutely.
actually, put together a long-term, capital planning committee that is looking at all of these things. And, we're actively involved in, in keeping track of that and making sure that it comes back to FinCom. But it is tricky. It's a tricky, like, it's not our job to set the, to set the articles unless we have a citizen petition article.
No, the point more was so that we're informed, that pipeline, that long-term, I don't think it's that long-term. We could be looking back-to-back overrides, or, we need to keep that in mind.
We've all seen the capital plan, it's huge. We know, it's no point in hashing it out right now.
Well, but just to add to it, and maybe like a request as you're talking to everybody as they're doing this, so we have the 5-year capital plan, but that doesn't touch on any of the big projects, except for acknowledge that they exist. But I know that they're working on the longer term facilities plan in priority list. It would be great to have that communication of what is the timing of when they expect to have that, not just for the schools, but for the town, and what are they going to do with that? At what point does that become a longer, is it 10, is it 15, but a longer, more detailed, here is, right or wrong, here's our assumption of what we may need, which has the detail that people have been asking for years. So it'd be great to understand and get clarity of like, what will be the output of that facility study, and how will we use that across the teams in the town to better make decisions. Like, we're paying for this study, I assume. How are we going to leverage that going forward? Or is that going to be squirreled away in a file cabinet to be seen by 4 people? Like, that's a thing that would love to get out.
We absolutely can take that back to Chris and the select board and get that feedback.
It's not for free, the study, I bet.
I
I
bet we paid a check for it.
And it's also, just to be very clear, not to be put in a filing cabinet for people to see as well.
Yeah.
So again, that, like anything, that will be made public to everybody.
Yeah.
Cool. Nada.
Thank you. Have you closed the public hearing portion?
We have
Not
not.
yet, but
Can I make a comment?
yeah.
Go for it.
It's going to seem petty from what you were just talking about, the multi-millions of dollars that we've been spending. And I was totally lost when you spoke about the Charter Review Committee. And I want to plant a seed because I see that I've been reading the red line versions of their changes. And I think that you really need to take into deep consideration the change to the quorum. When the meeting is started to when the meeting is finished. We have 40-plus articles now. And citizens' petitions sometimes are very, very valuable. And they get at the bottom of the list. And by 11 o'clock, 11:30 at night, I'm sitting there with my citizens' petition and maybe a couple of supporters because everybody else had to get home to their families, put their kids to bed for school or whatever reason. And I think that changing the quorum is not right. I think you really need to consider it.
Yeah, no, just to be really clear, all we were saying is that we don't need them to come back. They've already presented to us. We are absolutely going to have our public hearing. We are absolutely going to go through every article, including every change for the charter review. We just didn't need them to come back in and present the same thing because they made a minor tweak. But rest assured, we are absolutely going to look at that.
Thank you, and I have to thank Joe Prevatiera, who's not here, because he's the one that got the red line version online. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a red line version online, but like last year, it's misdated. So if, they gave us, and thank you very much, Allison, for putting on our OneDrive, they gave us a red line version that's dated very recently. But then their article themselves references go back to the website. When you go back to the website, the latest one they have is August 30th.
Yeah.
So,
We'll let them know.
Yeah, we can let them know that.
please.
The only add-on I would have to your update is just, again, please, we have to get all of our subcommittee meetings, we have to publish them. We have to go through Allison. If you're meeting with any of the town, as in the email that was sent out this morning, please work through Allison, don't go direct. I will say that I was the biggest violator of this last year. I reached out to Stephanie multiple times, and I will never do that again, so I will go through Allison.
I was going to talk to you about that, Mike.
I know, yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, so that's why I actually requested the subcommittee list, so that we can do that planning, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll get that out by tomorrow. Yeah, that's it for update. Anyone have any other business question? I think we already covered all that. Old business minutes.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Second?
I just say all
No,
in favor.
yeah, all in favor, yeah, you don't have to go roll call.
Okay. All in favor of
Actually,
approving?
before that, any comments,
Oh, sorry.
any feedback? No.
All in favor of?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay.
We're good. We have all our public comments, so we can adjourn with a roll call.
Motion adjourned?
Second.
Motion.
Nope, not roll call, just again.
We just do, oh yeah, sorry, it says roll call.
We're in person.
So, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.